Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. I am Uncivil Law, a licensed attorney in Texas, Virginia, and before the United States Supreme Court, and we are here with your legal news roundup. All the legal news occurring in your world so that you can be better informed, and I hope today is the day I earn that subscription. For our story, we have breaking news this morning that the FDA has approved the first ever birth control pill that does not require a prescription to start in 2024. The birth control pill was initially approved in June of 1960. And moving forward 63 years later, the FDA has now approved the first non prescription birth control pill. So it will be available over the counter to people who can just get it, at just basically any pharmacy without a prescription. So, a pretty big deal there that is happening in our world. Let's learn a little bit more about this. The FDA has approved an over counter birth control pill for the first time ever. The approval applies to O-pill, which is also a mini pill because it only contains one hormone, progesterone, where other combination pills contain both progestin and estrogen. So this is a lower dose, a lower hormone pill. So hopefully provides fewer complications, which is at least one of the reasons that the FDA had been concerned about the birth control pill in the past, because obviously when you're giving people hormones, that can have all kinds of side effects and can provide some problems for some people. And some people respond better to lower hormone pills. And this is one such pill that has now been approved. Medical experts and activists have argued that pushing for approval have argued the availability opens the door for young women as well as poor women who might not necessarily have time or resources to see a doctor or prescription. And as a person who has had difficulty getting access to doctors in his own right, just because getting a new doctor and getting someone to actually see you can be somewhat of a challenge under some circumstances, I would imagine even women who might have access to doctors could have potential actually getting access to those doctors. So this would allow people to just get something off the shelf right next to their Tylenol, and they can just get it, whatever. And also would apply for people of all ages and all backgrounds. So it provides an option. Of course, it won't necessarily be covered by any sort of insurance, although it might be. Your insurance might vary, but you'd have to, of course, submit for a reimbursement after the fact, depending on the circumstances. Although, of course, you could use a health savings account to use pre-tax money to pay for it if you are so inclined. So there are options, but it will be available for women over the counter. A doctor who is the director of the FDA Center for Drug Evaluation Research said today's approval marks the first time the non prescription daily oral contraceptive will be an available option for millions of people in the United States. The actual rollout to occur in 2024. The FDA saying that when used as directed, daily oral contraception is safe and expected to be more effective than currently available non prescription contraceptive methods in preventing unintended pregnancy, which would principally be barrier method, such as condoms. And so condoms have a higher fail rate, especially because they often are not used perfectly. So a contraception, typical oral contraceptives have a 98, 99% success rate depending. And so they can be problematic. They can be a lot better. Now, one of the issues with the contraceptions is they have to be taken at the same time every day. But, that should be reasonably doable, but it's something that has to be done, of course, on the regular for it to be workable. So it does require taking the medication at the exact same time every single day. So something to set your watch by, I guess. The O pill is different from other oral contraceptives in that it only contains the one hormone, progestin, which is not necessarily unique to this particular pill, but it is a factor of this pill. So many of the birth control pills have used estrogen or used a combination of estrogen and progesterone, and this pill is just the progestin. So hopefully having fewer side effects because it is less hormonal. Then mini pills 97% effective when used perfectly, The exact same time as the 3 hour window. Yeah, I didn't think we meant literally like on the dot. I didn't think we meant that. But 97%, that is 91% effective with typical use. Okay. Well, noted. I'll even put it into the story. Yeah. Why not? The Perigo company, who is based in Dublin, who makes the mini pill, will make it to store shelves and online retailers beside aspirin and Tylenol and other stuff and melatonin, at least in the United States, incidentally. Melatonin is prescription in some countries, which may come as a surprise to some Americans, but it is. So it will be available along those things sometimes between January and March of next year. So this mini pill apparently has something like a 97% effectiveness rate. Other oral contraceptives can be a little bit more effective with a more like a 99% acceptance rate. And it has to be taken at the same time every day within plus or minus about 3 hours or so. So it doesn't require rigid conformity, but you'd want to take it, for example, in the evening just before bed or something like that, or in the morning, first thing when you wake up, something like that for it to be predictable enough. But 97% isn't too bad. It's not necessarily, that's that's a pretty good rate. And so, with a little bit of other care, you obviously can drive that rate up. So should provide some protection to some people. The president of the pharmaceutical company said today marks a truly momentous day for women's health nationwide. Pill has the potential to radically transform women's access to contraceptive. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big deal. When the contraceptive pill first dropped in June of 1960, it was a pretty big deal. And there's been a lot written and thought about how the pill changed humanity and changed the nature of human nature because it was a pretty big deal and how it changed humanity and changed the nature. Whether that's for the best or not in the grand scheme is debatable or not, but it was a radical transformation from how humanity had lived its life up to that point. So it was seismic in its nature, and one would expect that this would be at least a significant ripple in a similar direction. The move has been hailed as historic by advocacy and medical groups such as Free the Pill and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, who had been lobbying for years to make the over counter birth control pill available at an affordable price. There is no planned age restrictions on sales, which would give teenagers who have not had family support to get a doctor's appointment the ability to get contraceptives. So I suppose some young teenagers will perhaps sneaking this pill behind their parents' back. So give parents a whole new level of concern, I suppose. Efforts to introduce the pill have ramped up in recent years and somewhat culminated with the elimination of abortion on the national level. So, because abortion is no longer available as a contraceptive, I guess, now we have to have something else. So the Biden administration, which apparently looked at abortion as a method of contraceptive, said, okay, because that contraceptive method is no longer available, we need to provide something else. And so has perhaps put their finger on the scales to increase the availability of the pill. What dramatic change do I think it will make? Well, Beck, I think it would be a change in the same direction that the pill itself had, as I indicated. And, it's a pretty significant change. I'm sure you can answer your own question on that one, so, yeah. Victoria Nicholas, project director of the health advocacy group Free the Pill, a group focused on bringing birth control pills over the counter, said over the counter birth control pills will help bridge gaps in access and give people greater control over reproductive health and lives. To ensure equitable access, we must continue to advocate for the birth control pills to be affordably priced and fully covered by insurance. That's the same with all pills? Yes, but this is now available without a prescription. which is a pretty significant change. So it's not like other pills. Now, is it? So one would imagine if the entire point, of it, well, I don't know if it's the entire point. Let's put it a different way. If a significant point of it is to make it available to people who otherwise wouldn't get access to birth control because they couldn't get to a doctor or they wouldn't have support or they don't have insurance or whatever. If a principal point or a major point of it is to increase the amount of people taking the pill, then it's not like other pills. It serves a function that other pills do not serve by its very nature. So one would imagine that that would have an impact. Otherwise, what's the point? You know? Yeah. What's this guy's problem so condescending? Well, first of all, fuck you. Second of all, um, I'm just answering your question. Uh, I'm just trying to answer your question. You ask me a question and I provide an answer. So if you don't like my answers, piss off. O-pill has been safely used for about 5 decades, but the United States has been an outlier when it comes to making pills available without a doctor's order. So I can't really speak to other countries in the world. There are a lot of countries in the world, so I'm not sure how much the United States is or is not an outlier compared with other countries in the world, but the United States certainly has not had a non-prescription option when it comes to birth control pills for the past. Unlike combination pills, it does not contain estrogen, which can increase the risk of blood clotting several fold, and therefore this is seen as lower risk. This pill works by thickening the mucus of the cervix, which makes it more difficult for sperm to enter the uterus in the first place and fertilize the egg. So apparently it doesn't work by inhibiting the egg from being released, but inhibits the ability of sperm to enter the uterus. And by lowering the sperm count, effectively reduces the risk of pregnancy. Asquitter says maybe doing research would help. Well, I did some research. I found out I did do some research. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that the pill came out in, for example, June 1960, because I didn't have that information off the top of my head. And like, do I know everything? No, I know some things. But what research you do want me to do? You want me to do a research to find out what the pill availability is in every country of the world to figure out whether it is or is not an outlier? I mean, how much research do you want me to do? OTC pills available worldwide? Bullshit. 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 OTC pills are available worldwide. There is no way that's true. Simple Google research. There is no way on this earth. There is no way on this earth that over-the-counter pills are available worldwide. That is some bullshit. You're rude. I'm out. Excellent. Thank you for coming. Please piss off. It works by thickening mucus in the cervix, making it difficult for the sperm to enter the uterus and fertilize the egg. Progesterone only pills do not prevent ovulation as well as combination birth control pills. Therefore, their effectiveness is slightly lower. Apparently, it's something like 97% as opposed to 99% plus. So there's that. The FDA's Non Prescription Drugs Advisory Committee and Reproductive and Urologic Committee, which met in May to discuss the approval, voted unanimously in favor of it, had two concerns about over the counter use. The first of which was the concern including obesity, which has become more prevalent over time. Currently, about 4 in 10 Americans are deemed medically too fat. In 1960, it was closer to like 1 out of 10. So the rate of obesity has increased. And research shows that obese women who take oral contraceptives have an increased risk of blood clots, though that risk is weaker when it comes to these pills. So maybe Americans should lose weight. And when I say that, I'm speaking to myself as well. Mike Childers, you can also fuck off. I know who you are. Andrew son, you can fuck off. Martin, you can fuck off. Mike, I don't care what you call yourselves today. Please fuck off. Agency officials said although the original clinical trials for the tablet do not present data based on weight or BMI, the prevalence of obesity in adults in the United States has changed dramatically since the original clinical studies were conducted over 50 years ago. The degree to which these pills are diminished in individuals who are overweight or obese remain unknown. FDA officials also worry that making the pill available without prescription could eliminate the opportunity for doctors to explain to patients the importance of taking the pill within the same 3-day window of time, raising the risk of missed dose. Yeah, this has been a bit of a thing. And I think really like part of the problem, like the doctors didn't want to give up the control over the pill because they wanted to examine women and lecture women and control women to some degree as well. So, take it within 3 hours. I'm sure that you can figure that out with some marketing, and putting it on the label, must be taken at same time of day for effectiveness. I'm sure you can fix that with appropriate warnings and appropriate box warnings and just make it really clear, put it right on the front of the box, must be taken at the same time every day or something like that. But yeah, and maybe a little bit of marketing campaign, but still. Yeah. Switzerland doesn't have OTC. Yeah. I was like, there's no way it's worldwide. It's not possible. There's no fucking way it's worldwide. That's just not possible. A company tried to address the concern in a study which mimicked an OTC environment to see whether people were able to take the pill as directed. The study found that 93% of people taking the mini pill did so on schedule every single day. So apparently, even with the information that's already available, we got 90% compliance. So I would imagine with a little bit of education and a significant, enough notice on the box and stuff like that, we can bring that number up. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. So, yeah. Yeah. Matova says, I think you underestimate how stupid a lot of people are. I'm just going to say dog microwave. A lot of people are pretty stupid. Well, this study says that 93% people were able to comply. So apparently 90% of people are not stupid. So, some people are stupid, but, we can't let the least common denominator drive these things. I'm not sure what the compliance rate is from people who get prescriptions. I mean, I seriously, I know for a fact it can't be 100%. People's ability to take drugs as directed by doctors is pretty shit too. So I'm not sure what difference there is when it comes to people getting pills from their doctor in terms of compliance, but I bet you it's not that much higher. So I'm not sure how much there's in it, to be honest. Thus, that brings us to the end of the story about the FDA approving this over-the-counter prescription birth kill pill. So it'll be over the counter for the first time in the United States since 1960, June of 1960, when they first approved the prescription pill in the first place. And this should be a pretty seismic change, I would imagine, since one of the principal points of it is to get the pill into more people's hands than have been able to take it before for a bunch of practical or whatever reasons. One would imagine that this will be a fairly significant change as it relates to America and American culture and how people use the pill or don't use the pill. So, all that. Plus, anytime that the FDA wants to approve a male birth control pill or other birth control other than, the condom, I think would also be fine. The women have had these abilities for 63 years. And the men have all they have is condoms. The day that they come up with a male birth control pill will be a very, very interesting day. It will be a very seismic change in our culture someday, maybe. But until then, that brings us to the end of discussion of this story. You've been out of the loop and didn't know this happened. It happened this morning. So that's okay that you don't know. It happened literally about an hour ago. So you're good. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great day. I'm having a great day. I'm uncivil law in a particularly uncivil mood because I'm tired of people. I'm in a mood where I'm like, I'm a little bit tired of people just trying to do this passive aggressive bullshit, especially, the person I keep banning over and over again. And I'll keep banning your accounts, because you're a fucktard and you need to stop being a fucktard. And I'm tired of your bullshit. So fuck you. Everyone else, I hope you're having a fantastic day. And people who actually want to, participate by not just bringing me down for absolutely no reason, just because they like to see me suffer, everyone else is welcome here. But Martin, Andrew's son, can fuck off. You're not welcome. Please fuck off forever. All right, great. And we can also swoop. All right, great. Yeah. Taking amphetamines when you're overweight with poor cardiovascular health is a very bad idea. Yes, it would be. Thank you, Bill, for that genius contribution to our thought. Yes, if you have cardiovascular health problems and you take amphetamines, the amphetamines will cause your blood to run faster and at higher pressure, which will put more strain on your heart. Wow. Thank you for that genius contribution. I'm not sure how that's relevant to anything we were talking about, but we really appreciate that insightful dialogue. Yeah. Extra testosterone can reduce sperm count. That's also true. Further information correct. Yeah. Yeah. Further correct information. Testosterone can reduce sperm count. This is correct when you're taking it artificially. It depends. Of course, everything depends. I know. Everyone understands this. We get it, right? Yes. But yes, so also because there's counter considerations, right? So, everything, especially in medicine, and I don't think medicine's particularly unique in this. Law has its own aspects of this is true. Like there's counter considerations to things. Not everything is free, as it were. There's not much that, especially when you're talking about the time when you're getting like doctors and lawyers and other professionals involved, is usually not free. Things come at the cost of something else. So yeah, do amphetamines put strain on the heart? Yeah, I would think. Is it worth it to put strain on the heart? Probably. In some situations, yeah, it's worth the cost trade-off. So can you tell me something else I don't know, right? Yeah. I just think it's your funny your cardiologist prescribes amphetamines to some patients. Yes, but that makes sense. It makes logical sense if you think about it for half a second, right? Every drug in the history of the world has side effects. I know, it's amazing. They come with a whole list of them. The risk of these side effects are somewhat determinative of whether it's prescription or not in the first place, because it's like, okay, is this safe enough for people to take generally, because generally accepted as safe, as they say in the trade, or does it need to be prescribed by a doctor? And even a doctor's like, hey, this drug has really unfortunate consequence, but really unfortunate consequence is worth, you know, it's worth it because of really dire situation. So yes, sometimes there's some trade-offs. Sometimes those trade-offs are even potentially fatal. But you're trying to solve a problem that's also fatal. Like if you want to give rapid onset blood thinners, for example, that's a great classic example for a doctor out there. Okay, you've got a patient with a severe clot. All right, you got a patient with a severe clot. All right. So what do you do? Well, blood thinners would be a good idea, but how severe is the clot? Is the clot like going to cause a massive problem right now? All right. So maybe one of the things you do is you give the patient really aggressive thinners, super aggressive thinners, right? To get rid of the clot in a very rapid way. Well, what happens when you do that? What happens when you give the patient really, really, really strong blood thinners? Well, there's a pretty significant risk the patient is now going to bleed out, right? Because if there's any sort of problem, with bleeding at all, internally, externally, whatever, there's a pretty significant risk the patient is going to bleed out rapidly. So giving the patient these really, really, really strong blood thinners to solve the massive, massive clot that's going to kill them right now might also kill them. So your options are A, let the blood clot kill them. B, let the massive blood thinners kill them. Go. You know, that's fun and exciting times for doctors everywhere. And other examples, of course, less extreme than that. So yeah. Yeah. So, you know, not good. Not great. So yeah, there's problems. Yeah. So is which of these twin evils do you like better, doctor? You know, yeah. Chemotherapy, there you go. Yeah. Let's give radiation to the patient to treat the cancer. What is one of the side effects of radiation? Cancer. So so there's that. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Electroshock. Yeah, electroshock isn't as scary as it was back in the day, though. So electroshock as a mental health treatment is still used, but it's not quite, you know, where it was when it got its negative reputation. That isn't to say that it's, you know, it's not. That isn't to say that it's, you know, hunky dory, but it is a lot less scary as a treatment than it was in the past. So the electroshock therapy, uh, while still somewhat extreme, is not quite as barbaric as it was back in the day. So yeah, yeah. All right. So all that good stuff. All right. Thalidomide. Thalamide. Oh yeah, that's a great one. Thalidomide. Yeah, that was approved again in let's see, what was that? That was when I was in high school. I think it was approved for the first time as an AIDS treatment. Yeah, thalidomide. Yeah, thalidomide is a great example too. Thalidomide was prescribed among other reasons. It was prescribed as a morning sickness remedy in the 1950s and 60s, I want to say. Yeah, thalidomide was prescribed as among other things a morning sickness remedy. What did thalidomide do? Thalidomide, as it turned out, caused very severe birth defects, really, really bad ones. So we were prescribing thalidomide to the pregnant women who we knew to be pregnant for the purpose of the morning sickness, and it turned out the thalidomide caused massive, massive, massive birth defects. So this was not great. So thalidomide was, you know, made illegal for about the next 30 years. And then I think starting in the late 90s, they started experimenting with it again as a treatment, I think initially for AIDS. And I think now also they're experimenting with it as a treatment for some cancers. Because, you know, yeah. So thalidomide is back on the market, baby. Yeah. Good times. Yeah, it prevents development in the first trimester. Yes, yes, it does. As I said, very severe birth defects. Yes, it certainly does do that. Yeah, some notable birth defects like limbs don't form. So there was that. So yeah, Accutane. Yeah, that's not quite in the same category, but noted. Yeah, it's not quite in that same category, but yeah, yeah. So yeah. So yeah, the history of medicine is an interesting one. ECT, convulsion treatment. That's right. Yeah. The birth defects were a clue. That's crew gritty. They were a big threat. Thalidomide can be used to off-label cancer treatment because the same endogenous inhibiting effect that causes the limbs not to grow causes the tumors not to grow. Yeah, that makes sense. That's logical. Yeah. I'm not sure about off-label though. I'm not sure that thalidomide can be prescribed off-label. Uh, in fact, unless things have changed, and I'm not, that up to date on it. But when it was initially approved, approved again, it was extremely restricted. It was like all the restricted, it could only be prescribed by certain doctors, with certain training, and it had to be prescribed in like these super ways because, if a woman even touches the pill, apparently it could be so toxic as to cause effects, as how concerned we were about it. So I'm not sure that thalidomide can be prescribed off label unless something has changed. But yeah, I think it is legal in the US, but it's very, 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 very tightly restricted. Yeah, I think it became legal again in the US in the late 90s, but under incredibly tight restrictions. Oh yeah, Ray Epps was supposed to be our next story. We're just not getting there because we're having a nice discussion. So we're in the middle of a discussion. Yeah, Ray Epps was supposed to be our next story, but we'll get there eventually. Someone said there was an update in the KD7M case. Let's take a quick look at that while we're having some fun. Let's see. Court. Let's take a look at 7M. Yeah. It's supposed to be our next story. We just haven't gone there yet. I wanted to start with the FDA thing because I did. So I'm not sure I need a bigger reason than that. Where am I trying to search? Let's see what is happening with Katie Joy Paulson today in this court case. Let's see. Okay, where am I looking? This one. Let's take a look at these details. Let's see what's happening. So something happened. Okay, so there's a proposed order or something. There's an affidavit, a memorandum. There's a whole bunch of shit. What the fuck is all this stuff? There's a substitution of counsel. So there's a new counsel in 7M. Let's take a look. Okay, so counsel just changed law firms. Okay, I can't be bothered to care. Let's see what else is going on. August 1st, there's supposed to be a hearing on the motion for compelled discovery. Okay. What else? Defendant's failure to prescribe discovery. So it's a discovery fight. Yeah, tell me something else that's new, right? Let's see. Other documents. What else we got? In this Katie Joy thing. Plaintiffs demand answers, blah, 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 whatever. So they're having a discovery fight. So I mean, discovery fights are pretty common. There's really nothing much to report there. Yeah, so it's just a discovery fight. Yeah. All right. So yeah, in the 7M case, there's a discovery fight, and they're supposed to have a hearing about it on August 1st. So there's nothing really to say. Discovery fights are not uncommon in cases. In civil cases, they're not uncommon. You go have a fight about it, and sometimes the judge has to referee. Judges typically hate discovery fights because they tend to be really petty sometimes. And so judges kind of are like, can't you just figure it out amongst yourselves? So as a general proposition, judges don't like discovery fights. And as a general proposition, you kind of want to avoid them sometimes because you don't know necessarily what's going to happen because judges don't like them. And so you don't know how they're going to come out. But, there's a discovery fight. It's nothing to write home about. There's nothing to write home about. One side wants something, the other side doesn't want to give it up. Ooh, So it's just so much, in the weeds, normal, whatever. There's nothing really to say about it. Wikipedia says thalidomide was approved as a cancer treatment in 1998. That sounds right. I thought it was AIDS rather than cancer, but the time sounds right. 1998 sounds right. Yeah. So yeah, that's right. 1998. I knew it was about that time frame because I remember it coming up during high school debate. That's why I know what the time frame was, because I was like, oh yeah, I remember this coming up when I was in high school and doing debate, and we're doing yeah, stuff. So I thought it was AIDS rather than cancer, but 1998 sounds right. So yeah. Can we have another swoop? You can indeed have another swoop. That's fine. I'm here for swoop time. Swoop time is glorious time for you and me. You and me. Swoop time is glorious time for you and me, baby. All right. In Ray Epps news, Ray Epps is now looking to sue Fox News for defamation over claims that Fox News made that Ray Epps was involved in a conspiracy as it relates to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And as part of this lawsuit, Ray Epps reveals that he expects criminal charges to be coming down the pike, which is a little bit surprising in some ways that it hasn't already come. I mean, he was literally there that day at the gates, whispering things to people as they charged in. And so, one would think that that would be, for example, an inducement or something like that. Things seemed a little bit weird. And also the night before, like actively encouraging people to take the Capitol and such and so forth. People have been charged over less, but Ray Epps, for some reason, not charged. And maybe he's going to be charged. So let's learn a little bit more about this lawsuit. Let's learn a little bit more about this defamation. Let's tease out a little bit more about these potential criminal charges. Let's get started with this. Ray Epps, who is a frequent subject of Fox News and a Trump supporter who claims he's the subject of conspiracy claims, is suing Fox News for defamation. Okay. I mean, all right. Um, Good luck with that on some level, I would think, because there seems to be a lot of information that Fox News is basing its claims off of. Because we can't help noticing that you're out in the crowds and seem to be somewhat strongly encouraging people to behave in ways that are not necessarily legal. And also, we can't help noticing that you were there on the day of, literally at the gates. But okay, so there's some suggestion that Ray Epps had some involvement in this in ways that are questionable. The suit, which is filed in Delaware, accuses Fox of creating and disseminating destructive conspiracy theories and recklessly disregarding the truth. Uh-huh. Epps' suit claims that Fox News used Epps as a scapegoat during the assault on the Capitol and told a fantastical story in which Ray Epps, who is a Trump supporter that participated in the protests on January 6th, was in fact an undercover FBI agent and was responsible for the mob that violently broke into the Capitol and interfered with the peaceful transfer of power for the first time in country's history. Well, as to first time in country's history, I'm not so sure about that claim. But as to them being an undercover FBI agent, well, whether or not they were FBI or not, there was a lot of his behavior did seem to be suggestive of someone who was a governmental actor of some kind who might be trying to stir things up, in a way to induce people to break the law. So when people were shouting "Fed, Fed, Fed" at Ray Epps, was he FBI? Maybe, maybe not. But was there some information that might suggest he was perhaps part of some sort of governmental operation on some level to perhaps get people to behave in a manner? Well, some of his behavior was at least suggestive of that possibility. Epps voted for Trump in both 2016 and 2020 and acknowledged being a mid outside the mob. Yes, he certainly did. And we saw saw him on camera doing a whole bunch of things that seemed to be, not necessarily in the most lawful, encouraging spirit. He said Fox News provided a platform as audience for claims that Epps was a federal agent planted as a provocateur to trigger the Capitol violence. Well, he was definitely provoking people. He might have been provoking people in a way that's lawful, incidentally, because when we talk about incitement legally, incitement requires imminence, requires it to happen right now. So was he inciting people the night before? Legally, no. He can't really be inciting people the night before. That's not really a thing because it gives people time to cool off. So, but he was provoking them, I think is fair in a non-legal sense, perhaps in a way that's not illegal. But to say that he was saying, let's go take the Capitol, let's storm the House, let's go take it, let's all do it. That's pretty provocative. Even if legal, it's provocative. So yeah. And was he there on someone's behest or someone's suggestion in some sort of official capacity of somebody? I don't know. But for people to say that his behavior was reminiscent of people who have done such things in the past, yeah, I think there's some suggestion to that, to be sure. The civil suit makes specific allegations about Fox News' host, Tucker Carlson. The suit says that Fox and Carlson commenced a year-long campaign spreading falsehoods about Epps. Those lies have destroyed Ray and his wife's lives. As Fox recently learned in Dominion voting system, lies have consequences. Yes, but Dominion voting is a lot different factually, at least to my mind, right? The whole basis of defamation is the basis for making claims. So when you're talking about Dominion voting and you're talking about things, it's like, what is your basis for making these claims? And they made it the last statements that are just provably false in Dominion voting. So, there was problems. And with Ray Epps, I'm not sure that necessarily is factually correct, or it's the same factual posture. As it doesn't strike me as immediately obvious that's the same posture, because Ray Epps was clearly involved in some sense with the January 6th. And that may or may not be criminal in its nature, right? When we talk about criminality, we have to get into the details, as always. But to say that Ray Epps was involved in some sense, well, he literally was there the night before, actively encouraging crowds specifically to invade the Capitol. And then he was there the day of, literally at the gates, whispering in someone's ear who then went through the gates. So, to suggest that he was involved and participated in some sense, even if what he did was legal, which is questionable, but even if it was, to say that he was involved, yeah. So the Fox News has a little bit more to work with, it seems to me, than they did with Dominion voting. So yes, defamation can be a thing. It's not inherently or immediately obvious. It's a thing in this particular context, though. But, we can see how it develops, I guess. After the Capitol riots, Carlson spoke about Epps on his Fox News show 20 times, saying, quote, Ray Epps, he's on video several times encouraging crimes, riots, and breaches of the Capitol. That seems to just be factually correct. He is on video encouraging crimes, riots, and breaches of the Capitol. That is a correct statement. As far as I can tell, I literally saw it with my own eyes. So he is on video. He is encouraging. Is it illegal? No, not necessarily. It's not necessarily illegal to encourage people to break the law, but he's doing it. So there's that. Epps told CBS on 60 Minutes earlier this year he went to the Capitol because he believed the election had been stolen from Trump. On January 5th, the night before the riot, he went to a rally and said, quote, tomorrow, we need to go into the Capitol. Into the Capitol. Uh-huh. That's yeah. And people responded, what? And Epps added peacefully and was met with cries, fed. So yeah, we need to go into the Capitol. Well, that certainly seems to be encouraging. That certainly seems to be provoking. That certainly is suggesting, it is suggestive of illegal conduct. it raises the possibility of illegal conduct, not incitement legally, because it necessarily has a time delay in it. But there's something there, possibly. He did that. He said that. He explained to Whitaker that he meant there should be peaceful protests at the Capitol, but said, I did some stupid things. Well, he didn't say we need to go at the Capitol. He said we need to go into the Capitol. So, yeah. On January 6th, he was seen in a video at the Capitol, pulling aside and saying something to one rider. Yeah, he seemed to whisper into a woman's ear just before she stormed past the gates. So there was that. Conspirators say he was giving marching orders because second later, the first Capitol officer went down. Like a second later, basically. I mean, yeah. Epps told CBS that when he saw the violence, he instead wanted to calm things down. He was never seen committing an act of violence that day or entering the Capitol. He later spoke with the FBI in the summer of 2021. The FBI removed his photo from the website. Yeah, it seems to me that the FBI and Department of Justice have arrested and charged people for less. So, was he behaving legally? I mean, there's an argument that he was behaving legally. I don't want to put it completely past the possibility that he was behaving legally. I mean, if the gates are the line of demarcation and he didn't pass the gates, then I suppose he didn't commit trespass. If he's merely encouraging people the night before, he's legally not inciting. And depending on what he whispered into the woman's ear, that could be legal too. So, did Ray Epps break the law? I honestly don't know. And I'm not trying to be too cute about it. I'm just trying to say I don't honestly know what law he broke because there's not immediately obvious. He didn't seem to pass the gates, no trespass. He didn't enter the building, so no parading. He didn't seem to openly say, let's enter the Capitol, and it happened right now, no incitement. There doesn't seem to be an agreement or that people made with him. So he said, let's enter the Capitol. And people said, yeah, let's enter the Capitol, which could be arguably conspiracy, maybe, depending. But so it's not immediately obvious that he broke any laws. But the FBI and DOJ seems to have gone out of its way for less and let him off the hook in a somewhat questionable way. Carlson took note of the photo's removal, and Trump responded too. How about the one guy? Go in. Epps, get in there. Go. Nothing happens to him. That seems to be a fair paraphrase of what occurred. So, yes, that's what he said. He said it the night before, but that is an accurate paraphrase of what seemed to be on tape. Epps said the threats and harassment that followed him forced him to sell his ranch. He and his wife now live in a 300 square foot recreational vehicle somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. The FBI said in a statement to 60 Minutes in April that Ray Epps has never been an FBI source or an FBI employee. All right, so it's pretty unusual for the FBI to actually say one way or another. They don't typically confirm or deny. So for them to finally say in April that he's never been an FBI source or an FBI employee, okay, so right. So we'll assume the FBI is telling the truth here, which I know is a big assumption for some people, but the FBI typically doesn't make these statements. So we could question this two different ways, by the way. First of all, is the FBI being very clever in their language, that he's not an FBI employee. Do they mean employee in the sense of like a W-2 employee? So he was never like an FBI agent in a proper sense? Or do they mean that he never worked with the FBI or never worked for the FBI? That he's not an FBI source. Okay, so he is not a whistleblower or a collaborator who turned state's evidence. But has he ever worked with the FBI in any capacity? Has he ever taken direction from the FBI? Was he working at the behest of the FBI? So the FBI says he isn't a source or employee. So first thing you could do is parse this because the FBI might be being really, really clever with their language, which would not be atypical, right? It's like, oh, he wasn't this, and they hope you read into it more than they really said. So that's the first way you could question it. Second of all, even if he didn't work with the FBI in any sense of the term, maybe he wasn't working for the FBI. There are a lot of law enforcement organizations out there. There are a lot of There are a lot of federal organizations, there are a lot of state organizations, there are a lot of local organizations. So was he working for the FBI? Even if you assume the answer to that question is no, he wasn't working for the FBI. It doesn't necessarily preclude him from being working for somebody else. Who might that someone else be? I don't know, but the FBI certainly isn't telling you that he wasn't working for any sort of law enforcement in any capacity. They didn't say that. So we could parse it on its own terms that he was working for the FBI other than as a source or employee. And even if he wasn't working for the FBI, it doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't doing something on someone else's behalf. Epps revealed in a civil suit that he expects to face criminal charges for his role. The suit says that in May 2023, the Department of Justice notified Epps it would seek to charge him criminally for the events of January 6th, 2.5 years later. Yeah, okay. I still have questions about that, to be honest. Now, yes, there are they going to charge him criminally, but then kind of let him off the hook easily because maybe he is an asset of somebody. Maybe the FBI, maybe not. Maybe he's not an asset at all. I don't know. I'm not saying. I'm simply saying that there's a question to file charge that it's like, oh yeah, we're doing something. Look at what we're doing. Will Ray Epps actually wind up serving any time? Will he see the inside of any sort of jail cell for any length of real time? If he does, I'd be interested, but I'm doubtful. I'm waiting to see if the Department of Justice really wants to prosecute this and they really want to convict him and they really want to put him in prison. Well, I'll believe it when I see it. They may have been using Epps and may not have known. Since he's not an employee, you can't say he's not an asset. Well, that's true only until you remember that the FBI is, of course, also an intelligence agency, among its many other roles. So if the FBI doesn't know that he's an intelligence asset, if he is an intelligence asset, it doesn't speak very well about the FBI. It's like, that they should be able to figure out he's an asset of somebody. So, you know, they could say, we have done a thorough investigation and been unable to find any evidence that he is an intelligence asset of any agency. They could say that. They didn't say that. So, yeah, I'm just sticking to what they said and assuming it's very, very carefully parsed. Yeah. In the suit, Epps states that he's not a federal agent, by which exactly, what do we mean exactly by federal agent? What exactly does that mean? Do we mean in the sense of being in the formal employ of the federal government? Or do we mean something a little bit less? Because it's not necessarily true that everyone who's working on behalf of the federal government is necessarily an agent in a technical sense. They might be working a little bit more off the books as an undercover informant, for example, or something like that. So, is he an agent? I don't know. Does that mean he wasn't working for the federal government in some sense? Don't know, but that's not what they're saying. He also says he's a loyal Fox News viewer and Trump supporter. The suit alleges that had the Department of Justice charged him in 2021, Mr. Carlson would hail Epps as a hero. Well, I can't really speak to that, but it would show him being treated similarly to other people who have been charged because we covered quite a few of these cases. And if Ray Epps is ever charged, we will definitely add one more to the FBI Capitol Riot series. So I wait for that to happen. Ah, yeah. Some are special agents like Fox Mulder. Yeah, okay. So the term special agent just means that, yeah, the term special agent doesn't mean as much as it does, as you think it does. Yeah, the term special agent just means someone with the power to arrest. At least if you're talking about the federal government. Other agencies, other states use the terms differently. But within the federal government, the term special agent just means the power to arrest. Everyone who's an employee for the federal government typically is technically an agent. I mean, within the standard meaning of agency, in sort of the standard meaning that you would mean it in civil law, like in yeah, everyone is working as an agent, and the federal government, their employer, is the principal. That's the nature of being an employee. So everyone who works for the federal government is necessarily an agent. All the term special agent means is that they have the power to arrest. So it doesn't mean that much. So the FBI definitely has people that don't have the power to arrest, right? They have a whole bunch of people that work for the FBI in technical support or logistic support, or as clerks or as secretaries or whatever. So the FBI has a whole bunch of people that don't have the power to arrest. So all special agent means is that they have the power to arrest. That's it. So don't get too excited. Epps' suit seeks a trial and compensatory and punitive damages. So good luck with all that. Is that what special means? It does in the context of the federal government, yes. Other governments use the terms differently. So it may or may not mean that when it comes to a state government or a local government, but to the federal government, that's what it means. Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, you have spies, all right? And spies are called secret agents. Why is a spy called a secret agent? Well, because they're an agent, because they're in the employ of the government, but we're not particularly keen to let you know that. So it's a secret. Hence, secret agent. It's in the name, right? Yes, they're an agent. They work for the government. We're not, thrilled to make that particularly clear because, they're a spy. So we're not going to go out of our way to let you know that. So it's a secret. Wow. I mean, it's amazing, right? Yeah. Thus, that brings us to the end for the moment of Ray Epps, who says that he's going to be criminally charged, and I'll believe it when I see it. And even if he is, I wait to see if he's really prosecuted the same way everyone else is. Will he really be held to account? I have questions. Was Ray Epps an agent for some sort of law enforcement apparatus, either formally as an employee or as an undercover informant or something? I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know who he is or what he is or why he was there or what he is. But I do know that he seems to be treated differently than other people, which raises reasonable questions. Why is he being treated so differently? Is it truly because Ray Epps did nothing illegal and the FBI found that out and they're like, oh, there's just nothing we can charge him with? We're a good FBI, we're a good Department of Justice, and there's simply nothing we can charge him with because he didn't do anything illegal. Is that it? Or is it more the fact that they're trying to cover up for something? I don't honestly know. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Maybe Ray Epps truly is nothing more than a Trump supporter who got a little out of control, but not in any illegal way, and the Department of Justice decided to defer. Maybe that's true. Or maybe something else. I don't know. But if he goes forward in this defamation lawsuit, I mean, they're going to ask him all kinds of questions about whether or not he's ever been in the employ of any sort of law enforcement, any contacts. And if their lawyers are smart, they'll ask it 18 different ways to really cover all their territory. So we'll see. At least for a moment, that gets us to the end of discussion of this story. All right. Thank you, Sandra Ramirez, for your continuing participation by helping us to support it. And Let's Go Brandon just became a member. Well, that's nice. Thank you, Let's Go Brandon, for hitting that beautiful, beautiful join button. It is appreciated. And thank you, of course, for all your support in the past. And thank you recently to Jules Buddha, of course, for his support. And also the other people who have been so supportive of Alan Parker, for example, Alan Parker, Jules Buddha, both really strong supporters of the channel recently. Let's Go Brandon, a strong supporter in the past. So, special recognition for people who have provided special and ongoing support to this channel because they are really appreciated. Discovery should reveal answers. One would imagine. Like, give us every W-2 slash 1090 slash 1099 slash whatever. Who give us the name of every person you've ever been employed by, paid for. Give us the name of every agency or law enforcement that you've ever had contact with ever, and so forth and so on. So yeah, Discovery would imagine that it would cover a lot of territories. And then if I'm the attorney, I'm asking the question every possible way I can think of. I'll ask it as to each agency specifically. It's like, have you ever worked in any capacity with the FBI? No. Have you ever been an agent for the FBI? No. Have you ever been paid by the FBI? No. Have you ever been provided information to the FBI? No. Have you ever, I'll just ask it every way I can dream of. And then I'll do it, 18 different ways for every possible goddamn agency on the face of the earth. Secret Service, Homeland Security, every one of the intelligence agencies, foreign intelligence agencies while I'm at it, throw in some big players in the foreign intelligence agencies into the mix. And then, ask the sort of global question at the end. Have you ever, then just as to any other, once I go through every specific version, I'll go ask as to any federal, state, any international, national, federal, state, local agency or whatever. So forth and so on. So yeah. All right, we have to push the button now. Push the button time. Push the button time. Let's Go Brandon says, stop being so cheap and sign up. It's 99 cents a month. You tell him, Let's Go Brandon. You tell him. Are you a liar? Can you ask that? I suppose you could. It's just not going to be particularly helpful. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Thank you for the 229 people who are here and participating. I appreciate each and every one of you who are here and help to participate and build up this channel and actually work to support me as a creator. It means a lot. Since I normally listen while watching, for the longest time, I didn't know why you were pushing a button at the end of the story. Yeah. Now you know. Now you know. To change the lighting is why we push the button. The Secret Service ended its cocaine investigation. Well, that was awfully fast. That didn't take very long. Well, at least they can't charge the cocaine with 18 USC 1001. This is such a bad joke. I can't believe I'm doing this. They can't charge the cocaine with 18 USC 1001. Why? She don't lie, she don't lie, she don't lie. Cocaine. I'm ashamed of that joke. Ah. From Let's Go Brandon, $4.99. Just a general question. Shouldn't some of these agencies and their agents be charged with entrapment? Also, cocaine's a hell of a drug. No, probably not. Entrapment's pretty hard. Basically, to prove entrapment, you have to prove that you wouldn't have done the crime but for the encouragement. So, to give a very classic example of something that is not entrapment, the police put an undercover agent as a prostitute. A classic, right? They put a undercover officer as a prostitute, as a streetwalker. And someone, drives by or comes up to the woman or whatever and be like, "Hey, baby, you want to have a good time?" She's like, "Yeah, of course I do." But so, what do you charge? Baby, for you, $200, whatever. I don't know. It's like, okay, let's go. I'm like, yeah, you're under arrest, right? So it's like, oh, I was entrapped. She tricked me, right? I didn't know it was a police officer. She was, dressed as a lady of the night. I thought it was a lady of the night, not entrapment, right? Because it's like you would have gone up to her, and in fact, you did go up to her if she wasn't a police officer. So the fact that she's a police officer is irrelevant because, the very fact you didn't know is the very fact that sort of precludes you from being able to plead it. Because it's like, well, I would have done it anyway. I would have done it if I didn't know she was an officer. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the problem, right? You were of a criminal mind to do the criminal thing. You attempted to do the criminal thing. The fact that, you know, you didn't know she's an officer is kind of exactly the problem. So entrapment only comes two ways. Not only do they have to entice you into the thing, but they have to you basically have to prove that you wouldn't have committed the crime but for the fact that it was the police specifically doing it, which usually comes into they overrided your will. So they did something that um in some sense forced you to engage in the behavior. So, you know, and that's kind of hard to prove. So entrapment's pretty hard to prove. So you have to prove not only did they try to encourage you, or you have to prove kind of that they coerced you, that they tricked you into it, that you didn't actually know what you were doing. Like, so if you could imagine a scenario where suppose, I don't know what the scenario this is, but I'm just having to make shit up off the top of my head to make it work, so bear with me. Suppose that a person you don't know to be a police officer comes up to you and says, "Hey, that woman that's wearing that mini skirt on the street, you see her?" And you're like, "Yeah, um, that's my sister. You know, and I don't want her, you know, working. So could you, you know, pay her to, you know, go away with you, and you know, so that she, you know, that she won't do it. And here's some money, but I can't have it be me. Obviously, she won't listen to me. But you know, here's some money to you know, pretend to hire my sister, but you're not going to actually sleep with her. But you know, you have to pretend that you will, and you know, so that she'll go with you, and then you know, sit her down and maybe we'll have an intervention or something. I don't know this scenario. Okay, right? So now with that, you go up to the woman and you'll be like, "Hey, baby, you know, do you want to come? You don't want to come sleep with me?" But actually, in your own mind, you don't really mean it, right? Because that's not really what you're saying, not really your intent. But from an outside perspective, it looks like it is. So the police got you on tape, right? Because you're a good actor and you're a good friend. So you go up to the woman and be like, "Hey, baby, you want to come with me for the night? You know, I got $1,000 for you." She's like, "Oh yeah, daddy, you know, sure thing. All right, hop in my car. Hop in my car. You're under arrest for solicitation and prostitution." All right. So in this scenario, no, because you did not have a criminal mind. Your intent was not to solicit for prostitution, even though, you know, from an outside perspective, it looks like that. On tape, it looks like that. But that's not really what you were doing. What you really were doing was trying to entice her away because you were misinformed by someone who happened to be a police officer and who tricked you into it. So that would be a scenario, you know, or, you know, you don't go up to that woman right now. You know, I'm going to have your kids taken away from you. You know, I'll have child services come away, take up your kids if you don't try to solicit that woman right now. Don't ask questions. I'm trying to invent things off the top of my head. So and you do it because I don't know, you know, you were duressed into it. So that's the kind of thing you're looking for. Is you need a little bit more than just a simple, you know, I didn't know she was a police officer. If your argument is I didn't know they were a police officer, that's not going to work. You need a little bit more. They tricked you, coerced you, conned you, fooled you into committing something you would not otherwise done. You were not predisposed to commit the crime. So the police merely saying, "Hey, would you like to break some laws with us? Breaking laws is fun," is not entrapment. I hope this answers your question. Yeah. So to some degree. Ooh, good question. $20. If you could go back in time, 1776, and change or add anything in the Constitution in order to prevent centralization of power and influence of money interests in politics or legislation, what would it be? Good question. I do have a proposal to amend the Constitution. I'm not necessarily sure it answers your question, but I think it would be a benefit. So I'd like to amend the Constitution to do two things. I'd like to amend the Constitution to require the congressional districts to be drawn uh, by maximum compactness, because that would prevent the lines from being drawn by political considerations, because you're just doing a pure mathematical model. So you just by drawing them maximally compact, there's basically only one way to do that mathematically, and so you're just trying to solve a mathematical equation at that point. And so there's only one answer, and so there's nothing to decide, right? It's just a pure mathematics. So that would by its nature prevent politicians from redrawing the lines for political reasons, and it would allow the population to choose their electors, their people, rather than the politicians draw the lines. So politicians would no longer have the power to draw lines. So I'd amend the Constitution to require congressional districts to be drawn maximally compact. The second thing I would do to change the Constitution is I'd like to change our methodology of voting. We currently use what's called first past the post. Whoever gets the most votes wins, but this is not ideal, because it creates problems. To point out an obvious problem, suppose that 10 people are running for an election. It's theoretically possible that someone could win with 11% of the vote, right? Because if they all split the vote evenly, except for the one guy, right? So if they all split the vote evenly, 10 people, 100% of the vote, split 10 ways is 10%, right? Obviously. If you split 100% of the vote 10 ways, it's 10%. So if one guy is just slightly more popular than the rest of them, right? Someone could win with theoretically 11% of the vote, right? So they win even though 89% of the people didn't vote for them. This is not ideal. So I'd like to change our methodology of voting to something like approval voting or single transferable vote. It would, as a practical matter, I think, substantially decrease the power of the two major parties and increase the probability of third parties winning elections. So it would also allow for voters to more accurately reflect their voting preferences. So the people that got elected would be more an accurate representation of what voters actually wanted. So so by redrawing the congressional districts to require that they be based just purely on where people live, so it takes that political consideration away, and by requiring voting to be done by something like single transferable vote, it would allow political preferences to more accurately reflect what the population really wants. And so those are my proposals to amend the Constitution. I hope this was helpful. Instant runoff voting is single transferable vote. It's the same thing. So yeah, it's known by different names. Instant runoff voting is single transferable vote. So yeah, call it something else. It's fine. Yeah. So those are my proposals to amend the Constitution. Ranked choice is single transferable vote, is instant runoff voting. It's all the same thing. Yeah, so single transferable vote, instant runoff voting, ranked choice is all the same thing. It's the same thing by a different name. Why do anything about indigenous rights? No, not explicitly. Those are my proposals. Yeah, those are my proposals. So I wouldn't do anything about indigenous rights explicitly. All right, let's do something else. In today's stupid article time, we respond to an article from the Los Angeles Times that says that the 303 creative website decision, which says that, hey, people have freedom of speech and you can't compel that speech, compelled speech is bad, could swamp all civil rights legislation. Well, Los Angeles Times, not to put too fine a point on it, but all civil rights legislation is, by its nature, legislation. They are acts of Congress, which, is great and all, but the Constitution itself says the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. So yes, to the extent the First Amendment trumps civil rights law, the First Amendment trumps civil rights law. I know, it's amazing. The Constitution, which says it's the supreme law of the land, is necessarily supreme to all civil rights law because that's the nature of what it means to be the supreme law of the land. Permanent, preeminent, of more importance, greater priority. Yeah, it's so yes, to the extent the First Amendment trumps civil rights law, it trumps civil rights law. I know, amazing. Constitution for the win. Let's respond to this stupid article time from the Los Angeles Times. The Los Angeles Times writes, now that the legal door has been opened to anti-LGBTQ plus bigots or racists, and I will note right away, by the way, Los Angeles Times, not for nothing, but you are somewhat misquoting the opinion because the opinion only talked about LGBT rights. So I'd like to take note that you apparently have a disagreement with the Supreme Court already, even the minority opinion, by the way. So maybe you should be writing how Sonia Sotomayor is a super bigot because she doesn't recognize Q or plus, apparently. But whatever, pressing on. There's no telling how far Supreme Court license to discriminate will go. I know the answer to this question. It will go as far as the First Amendment goes. It's amazing. Wow. So yes, you have the power. Private people have the right to discriminate because the Constitution doesn't apply to private people. It only applies to government. Private people can discriminate. Statutes can prevent them from discriminating, but the First Amendment trumps. Like, for example, freedom of religion, for example, is very discriminatory by its nature. Because when you have freedom of religion, you don't want to, do other religions. So should there be discrimination on the basis of religion? Well, if you're a religious person, then kind of very much yes, because you naturally want to practice your religion and not others. It's amazing. I know. It's shocking and true, but the Constitution recognizes the right to make choices. It's super deep. Last month, the court's conservative majority, super right wing, I'm sure, ruled that a website designer who, by their nature, is producing speech would not have violated the state's anti-discrimination law if she refused to create a wedding website for gay couples, because she's refusing to create a website which is by its nature pure speech. It's pure speech. It is non-utilitarian. It merely provides information. Information is not technically useful. It is merely providing information and pure speech. So, they say I don't want to provide the speech because I don't like to provide that speech. So yeah, she doesn't have to provide that speech. It's true. Did you guys notice how I slipped in there further mention of the fact that it's not utilitarian? Just to tease you guys. Did you guys pick up on that? Yeah. Mind you, Lori Smith, the proprietor of 303 Creative, was not actually creating wedding websites at this point, but she wanted to know in advance whether it would be okay to turn away gay people because she abhors same-sex marriage. Well, it's not exactly turning away gay people. That's the thing. According to the stipulated facts, which, by the way, you seem to have no interest in, she said that she would, in fact, serve gay people who wanted her services. She just wouldn't create speech that says that, gay marriage is good, which is sort of implicit in a website. So she will provide graphic design services and web design services to gay people. She just doesn't want to provide the services that say, I like gay marriage, which is implicit in a gay marriage website. Smith is represented by the right-wing Christian legal juggernaut, the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is hell-bent on reversing the LGBTQ plus rights. To Smith, her lawyers attested same-sex marriage is not only problematic because it violates God's will, but because also it harms society and children, because marriage between one man and one woman is a fundamental building block of society and the ideal arrangement for rearing children. Well, that sounds like an opinion. Some people may not share that opinion. It's okay. You don't have to share that opinion. If you disagree with that opinion, you can express your own opinion using your own speech. That's fine. You just can't compel her speech. You can't force her to speak the words you disagree with. I know. It's amazing. In telling their client story, the ADF laid it on thick. Oh boy, they laid it on thick. Are you sure they are the ones laying it on thick and not you? This seems a little bit thick to me, but okay, continue to lay it on to me. Lori believes that our culture's movement away from God's design for marriage is particularly pronounced in the wake of Supreme Court's Obergefell versus Hodges decision, which held there's a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. Yeah, okay, so she thinks that, the culture is heading in the wrong direction. She seems to be a Christian who actually, believes in this stuff and thinks that this is not what marriage is supposed to be, which is a pretty uncontroversial opinion, at least if we go back in time, let's say, I don't know, 30 years ago, was a pretty uncontroversial opinion. But now her I thought it was bizarre to be able to bring a lawsuit with imaginary facts. But as the Berkeley law dean explained to me, federal law allows for it, especially if the situation seems likely to arise. Yes. So, there is such a thing as a pre-enforcement challenge, particularly in the First Amendment context, because the Supreme Court and the federal courts are particularly interested in freedom of speech issues because, we consider it probably the most important constitutional right, which I tend to think is true. The right to speak is the right to think. And the right to think what you want is the right to be able to believe and have your own opinion. So the right to speak is the right to think. And, you can, in some situations, bring a pre enforcement challenge. So simply because, it hasn't happened yet is not necessarily a bar, particularly in the First Amendment arena. So, yeah. No one should have to eat a mushroom in order to know if it's poisonous or not, the dean said. She said, I'm not going to set up this business if I have to save subcapsules, so let me know in advance. Fair enough. Wow. I appreciate you conceding that point that, maybe it would be okay for sometimes people to bring these suits. I know the pre enforcement challenge is a little bit untypical, because the injury hasn't occurred yet. So we're talking about standing issues and whether or not you have enough standing because nothing bad has happened to you yet. But you don't necessarily need the bad thing to happen. You can get declaratory judgment in advance. And you just need it to be certain enough, sure enough that it's essentially imminent. And here she's like, I want to create a website. I've seen Colorado from how they've treated Masterpiece Cake. I have a pretty good indication to my mind that they intend to enforce the law this way, which, by the way, Colorado doesn't incidentally deny. They're like, no, we have no intention of forcing this. They're like, yeah, we're totally going to do this. So the fact that it hasn't happened yet, well, it's not necessarily a bar and certainly not in this domain. As for reports that Smith made up the gay couple, she claimed contacted her for the wedding website services, even though she hadn't launched the business yet. She says the dean says it no longer matters. Once the court decides, you can no longer challenge the case. Yeah, so okay, let's talk a little bit about this issue, about this so-called made-up evidence, because the whole thing is a little bit bizarre. So the day after she filed the lawsuit, she apparently gets an email from somebody saying, would you create for me a gay wedding website? Now, at this point, she has not yet created any wedding websites, but she is a website designer. So she does create websites for other purposes. And she hasn't said, at least publicly, that I'm aware of at this point. She hasn't like on her website. Well, no, maybe she has. I don't know. But she's like, whether or not she creates wedding websites, but she creates websites in general. So the day after the website, she apparently gets an email. I apologize. The day after the lawsuit, was filed, she apparently gets an email from somebody saying, create me a wedding website, to which she didn't respond. Now, it has apparently come out after the fact that this man denies having sent this email. The law firm, for their part, that represented her, is like, we didn't make it up because there'd be no reason for us to. Also, it came out the day after we filed the lawsuit. So we thought we had enough standing, incidentally, the day we filed the lawsuit. So we added it to it because, it's an additional piece of evidence, but it was always a pre-enforcement challenge. It was never based on she had received a request. At the time we filed the lawsuit, she had not received a request. So we didn't file the lawsuit on the basis that she had received the request. We brought it as a pre-enforcement challenge in the first place. So, there's that. So what's true behind this email? I don't know. Why some person other than him would file it with his specific information? I don't know. Maybe it's a prank. Maybe he did it and it's just denying it. I don't know. But it doesn't really matter either way because this was filed at a time when there were no requests at all. It was always a pre-enforcement challenge, which is a little bit rare, but not in the First Amendment arena. So, yeah. It will come as no surprise the Alliance Defending Freedom also represent the Colorado baker who won a limited Supreme Court victory after refusing to make a wedding cake. Well, that seems like a pretty good people to hire. You know, there are people who are very, 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 very familiar with the issue because, they've lived and breathed the issue through Masterpiece Cake. So could another attorney do this? I would imagine, sure. But if you're looking for a person to do it, well, the people that already took Masterpiece Cake to the very end are a pretty reliable source. You know that they're going to represent you. And they're also extremely familiar with the law because they've lived and breathed it. It is in their essence. So, yeah, she hired the same law firm or the same entity that helped to defend Masterpiece Cake because they seem like a good choice. It's amazing. Later, and I tell you to demonstrate the fears about repercussions of the Supreme Court sanctioned discrimination are not saying fact. The same baker, Jack Phelps, found himself back in court after refusing to make a cake celebrating a gender transition. Yep. So after the whole wedding web cake where they kicked it back because they thought the Colorado courts didn't, or the administrative agency, more to the point, didn't sufficiently represent his religious rights, and this case is decided on freedom of speech grounds rather than freedom of religion grounds, so it's a little bit different than Masterpiece Cake. Masterpiece Cake was brought primarily on religious freedom grounds. The Supreme Court decided it, such as they did, on religious freedom grounds. They're like, you showed animus to his religion at the levels below, which there was more than some evidence about. So yeah, they kicked it back, and then someone said, how about a gender transition cake? And he's all like, nah, fam, I didn't do the gay cake. I'm not doing the gender transition case. And amazingly enough, Colorado went after him again. What are the odds? What are the odds? Basically 100%, but yeah. So yes, he doesn't want to design the cake to spread a message about gay marriage or gender transition. He's not particularly fond of either one. Who will bake the cake? Literally anyone else, I would imagine, but we want specifically him to bake the cake because it has to be him, because I don't know, he makes just the best cakes in the world. I don't know. What he can and can't do remains contentious. The state appeal court found that he violated Colorado's anti-discrimination law. Well, yeah, but the courts are going to have to reconsider that in light of the Supreme Court's decision because, speech, and he doesn't want to be compelled to make speech. So Colorado apparently really into going after people for violating this law. So once again, when we're talking about standing of 303 Creative, we can't help noticing that Colorado seems to be really, really eager to prosecute all these people into forcing to speak the way that they Colorado wants. So I think that there's enough likelihood of prosecution. In my case, I can go forward. How so? Because the customer, Autumn Scarina, had simply ordered a pink cake with blue frosting. That design, the court said, had no message or imagery that could be construed as violating the baker's rights. Well, the baker doesn't quite see it that way. The baker doesn't quite see it that way, that it doesn't spread a message. So, he thinks it spreads a message, particularly because you told him it was to spread a message. So you're like, I want this specifically because of the speech it represents. So he's like, yes, this represents speech. That's not fair. That's not fair. It doesn't have any imagery. Well, you know who disagrees with that? The person who requested the cake disagrees with that. What are you talking about, court? Of course, they've appealed to the Colorado Supreme Court, who, probably will have to take a second look at that in light of 303 Creative. But apparently, the Court of Appeals thinks the cake doesn't have any message, even though the person apparently specifically requested it, specifically because of the message it would request. So, yeah. But back to 303 Creative. Why, in this case, the Supreme Court said essentially, why, yes, of course, Miss Smith, if same-sex marriage goes against your belief, then by all means you refuse your service. The nature of the service is speech, sir. It is in the freedom of speech. This is not just any service. It is not just a simple good. It is not a useful article. It is not a utilitarian thing that has utility. It is not utility, okay? She's designing websites that have no utility. They have no useful purpose in a technical sense. All they do is spread information, which is not useful. So, yeah, she is supplying specifically a surface that goes directly to a core First Amendment interest. The court's opinion did not turn on the beliefs that arise from religion, because this was not decided as a freedom of religion case, but rather as a freedom of speech case, because that's more on point. The issue is not really, strictly speaking, her religion as such, but rather her forcing compelled speech. So she can't be forced to compel the website, which is not useful because it goes directly to her core First Amendment interests in freedom of speech, which does not have utilitarian value. Being me, am I doing improv to become a trial attorney next? Well, that is not necessarily my goal. I don't really want to become a trial attorney, I don't think. I would want to do appeals, if anything. I think trial work would drive me crazy. Um, I'd want to do appeals, I think, if I were going to go back into the practice of law. So my prior work is in the transactional sphere. Um, my work, if I were to go back into law, would be in the appellate sphere. I think trial work would drive me insane. Um, because I don't want to deal with facts. Facts are messy things. I don't want to figure out what the facts are. Those are annoying. Um, but the reason I'm taking the classes primarily is to help me in my trade as a YouTube presenter. I figure that improv classes will teach me techniques and skills that help me with you, because basically I'm improving everything. I'm always improving what I'm reading. I'm improving what I'm reading, and then basically being like, yes, and here's some other stuff, right? So I read the article and be like, yes, and let me tell you about this. Yes, and let me do this. So this entire channel is in some sense improv, because it's like I'm using the source material as my other partner in the scene, if you like, and then being like, yes, and here's some further discussion. Yes, and here's another point. Yes, and here's why I think that's, whatever. So I figure that the improv comedy, well, comedy is the wrong word, by the way, because improv isn't necessarily comedy. So I misspoke there, because improv can be drama. This is a misconception. Um, I think the improv skills help me as a YouTube presenter. So one of the primary purpose I'm using it for is to help me as a YouTube presenter. And then, of course, to the extent I become an appellate attorney, that's a lot of improv when you're at oral argument, although less so because you've practiced the shit out of it, hopefully, to know what's coming, but still, you're going to get surprised occasionally. So that's the purpose behind it, is to help me in my craft as a YouTuber. And benefits to me as an attorney, as an appellate attorney, are also relevant. So it has lots of skills that are relevant to my craft. It's also one of the reasons I'm looking at other acting classes as well, um, because I figure that other acting classes can teach me, how to better read a monologue, for example. Because what am I reading, right? I'm reading an article, and what might be one way to look at it? Like, well, it's just reading it as a monologue, right? So if I learn how to read monologues better and present monologues better, that helps me in my craft. If I learn how to, better display emotion and better extract emotion from text, because again, typically when actors are faced with a role, typically they're faced with text, right? The script. It's unusual in scripts, to my understanding, for them to provide the information on how to do the take. They don't provide direction in that sense. It's up to the actor to take the text and transform it and use the emotion and present the emotionality. And of course, that's in concert with the director as well. But it's up to the actor at least to provide their initial presentation. And who you hire as an actor is obviously going to drive that. So, acting classes to help me learn how to better monologue, how to extract emotion from text, how to read text, how to improv and riff off text, how to do things like that. Lots of benefits to my YouTube career, I would imagine. So that's sort of a lot of my motivation behind it, is to help me in my craft as a YouTuber. So I hope that answers your question. And also, not for nothing, to improv based off the chat, because the chat also is now my partner in a scene, right? You guys provide me, and you guys are constantly providing me with all these wonderful prompts, right? Constantly, you are my audience, constantly providing me with prompts, and then I can be like, yes, and yes, and yes, and, right? Yes, and like for example, you just now, right? You asked me, are you using improv for this? Yes, and let me tell you more about it. Yes, and I'm doing this, you know? So you guys are my scene partners, and I use your unscripted input and be like, yes, and let me tell you about it more and this and this. So it has lots of benefits to it. Yeah. So there's lots of benefits to my craft as a YouTuber is my sort of belief and is my belief and presumption. All right. Making a wedding website may indeed involve the maker's creative expression. You think? You think that a website might involve creative expression? You think LA Times, wow, that's genius. But what else falls into the category? In a wedding context, says the dean, it could be designing a cake, floral arrangement, stationery. In context, it could be a cabinet maker. All that's open. There really is no stopping point. Well, Dean, not to put too fine a point on it, but this is why this case, as a pure speech case, was a better vehicle than Masterpiece Cake, because Masterpiece Cake dealt with an article that has utilitarian purpose. It is a cake. It is suitable for being eaten. It is suitable for providing nutrition. It is a utilitarian article. It has utility, right? So these other examples, like floral arrangement, stationery, cabinet making, right, get into this issue of blending a useful article with a speech. And how to separate that gets a little bit legally tricky. And the Supreme Court dissent talked a little bit about regulations that are incidental to speech. In the example of a cabinet maker, probably much more incidental, right? A cabinet is pretty utilitarian. It might be very nice, it might be very well created, but it's primarily a utilitarian article. And so separating the distinction can be a little bit tricky in some of these examples, but that's exactly why they brought this particular case, because it's pure speech and doesn't involve a useful article, because the website is not useful, because all it does is provide information, and that is not a useful article within the meaning of the law. So how does this deal with things that have utilitarian purpose? Unclear, but there is some case law dealing with it, and we'll have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. I'm going to continue doing this utilitarian useful thing just to continue driving the point home, because we had like a 20-minute discussion about it. Doubtless, determining what qualifies as expressive activity by the First Amendment can sometimes raise difficult questions. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair, especially when you're embedding the speech into the useful. Separating them out can sometimes be tricky. That's fair. You may not be able to define expressive activity, but undoubtedly know it when you see it. That's true, especially as you get a little bit more and more into the useful. Finding the speech and separating the speech can get more and more tricky. So fair, there is a bit of a line drawing problem. We have a bit more ability to deal with this as we are more into the pure speech arena and less into the useful arena. But as you continue trying to do it, it gets tricky. But that's often true in law. It's tricky sometimes on the borders. Tell me a lot of legal situations when that's not true, right? Trying to separate things sometimes gets a little bit murky in the middle. Tina says, whatever you're doing, don't stop. Enjoy seeing you smile more, and there's more calmness in your voice. Been watching you since Step Heard, and there's definitely a difference, and it's great. Well, thank you, Tina. That means a lot to me. I appreciate that. It has been an interesting ride. It's been a year since Johnny Depp, right? It's been a year. And in that year, a lot has happened to me, not the least of which, by the way, was me leaving my job, which was providing a lot of existential pressure on my depression. So, as I've talked about many times, I suffer from depression. My job was a major external pressure adding to and aggravating that depression. So, removal of that has been a significant benefit to my depression. The depression is still there, but fortunately, it's not being aggravated all the time by that. Also, my recent workouts seem to have helped a little bit. My cardio is complete garbage, and I need a lot of help. And I'm definitely the fat ass of the gym. But then again, I'm kind of in the place I'm supposed to be, aren't I? The fat ass should be in the gym. So becoming not a fat ass. And so that seems to help. Did you know I worked out 13 times last month? I was surprised too. That was cool, man. I looked at my logs and I was like, wow, I was at the gym 13 times last month. I'm like, that's not bad, you know? For various sick days and various times that I was at the gym 13 times in a month. I'm like, hey, that's some pretty good progress. We're making some good progress along the way. We're not doing too bad on civil. Things aren't great right now, but we're heading in the right direction. We're making progress. Things are getting better. Let's continue to make things better. Yeah, that's nice. Wow. You know? Great. Yeah. The ACLU, staunch defender of the First Amendment, and while that used to be true, I'm much less sure it's true now, said the court got it all wrong. The case was not about free expression, but about discrimination. Uh-huh. Properly framed, the ACL wrote, the question presented is whether an artist who has chosen to open a business to the public at large can constitutionally be prohibited from discriminating against customers on the basis of protected characteristics. That's not the proper way to frame the issue. The issue is the message they want. She's not discriminating on the characteristics, she's discriminating on the message. As long as they don't want that message she disagrees with, they can hire her all day long. That's in the stipulated facts. So that's not the right way to frame it. It is too soon to see exactly what ripple effects this unfortunate decision will have. But you can be sure it will be construed in many quarters as a license to discriminate purely on personal beliefs. Blah. That's not at all what the decision says. It's not even close to what the decision says. You are an idiot, LA Times. This is all about the First Amendment and freedom of speech. This is about compelled speech. Compelling speech is bad. The LA Times, I would think, and this is the thing that continues to befuddle me when it comes to such things, is that newspapers like the LA Times seem to not understand this principle, because you would think if anyone would be interested in freedom of speech, it would be something like the LA Times. The LA Times is somewhat in the trade of speech. That's kind of all they do. The LA Times is also about as pure First Amendment as it gets. Not because they're special because they're press, which they're not. They're not special in that sense. They are, however, about pure speech as it gets, because there's nothing useful the LA Times does. And I mean that in both a technical and colloquial sense in this case. There's nothing useful about what they do. All they do is provide information, such as it is. But, they are just the fact that they don't seem to appreciate that that they don't value their own First Amendment interests is somewhat beyond me. I don't understand why they don't jealously, and I use that word in its technical sense, why they don't jealously guard their First Amendment and seem so willing to give it up is a little bit beyond me. I suppose the cause is even more important than their own First Amendment, which is amazing. Jules Buddha's here. Jules Buddha's here. Jules Buddha. Jules Buddha. Jules Buddha with the super chat support in the form of memberships. As the Colorado Attorney General put it after the decision came down, a business may think it has the right to refuse to serve interracial couples because it believes interracial marriage is wrong. Well, to the extent it's pure speech, probably yes. Because, discrimination on the basis of race is bad. You probably shouldn't do it. But to the extent it's pure speech, yeah, you probably can refuse to create a wedding website for an interracial marriage. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but you could, because it's speech. Speech is primal. Wow. A payroll company may refuse to service woman-owned businesses because it believes the woman should not work outside the home. That one, not so much. The payroll company is providing a utilitarian thing at that point. They're just providing there's no real speech in that. Uh, a bookseller of religious texts may come to believe it could refuse to sell books to a member of the Church of Latter-day Christ. No, not so much. No, at that point, you're not speaking. You might be speaking in choosing which books to sell, but the books are already made and printed. You're not creating new speech in the act of selling them. You might have speech in so much as you choose which books to sell. We can't force you as a bookseller to sell a particular book, but if you choose to sell that book, you have to sell it to all comers because there's no speech in the selling of it. So, no, these examples are absurd. $5 from Duncan says, "What if I paid for ad space in the LA Times to celebrate being straight? For some reason, I don't think they go for it, but it seems pretty parallel." Yeah, the LA Times doesn't seem to understand that for some reason. Is beyond me. They don't seem to understand that. Yeah. Thanks to the Supreme Court, the possibilities for discriminating against those who have traditionally been protected by civil rights are endless. The LA Times says apparently not understanding the first thing about the First Amendment, even though they should understand everything about the First Amendment because they're the LA Times and the First Amendment is kind of what they do, but somehow not getting the memo. It is beyond me. Thus, that brings us to the end of this LA Times article about the stupid, about how 303 Creative's decision could swamp civil rights, and not so much. No, not so much. This is a First Amendment decision about the First Amendment, especially about the compelled speech. So, can a Christian bookseller choose who not to sell to? No, not really, because there's no speech in it. Can an accounting firm choose who to sell its accounting services to? Probably not. There's no speech in it. Can the cake designer choose what messages to put on the speech? Probably, because there is speech in it. I'm not quite sure how they don't get this, but they don't seem to get it. And they think that this decision will, end all civil rights law, which no. And they're full of dumb. And that, for the moment, brings us to end discussion of this case. Yeah. Yeah, Eddie, the caffeine is somewhat helping. I wake up tired every day. It is annoying. Push the button. Push the button. Push the button. Push the button. Time. Yeah. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. Liquid B12 for tiredness. That's not a bad idea. Maybe I could try some liquid B12. Arnold, I know who you are. Arnold, you are Martin and Andrew's son. Please continue to fuck off. You are not welcome on this channel. I don't care what you call you. Please fuck off and die. Please burn in the fire, you turd. All right, let's see what else we got today. What did he do? He's Martin. He's Andrew's son. I know him. What did he do? He has been harassing me on my channel for months under various names. I know who he is. I know how he writes. His writing style is very familiar to me. He's a fucktard who needs to learn that he's not welcome here and to stop harassing me constantly. Fuck off. How about that for an answer? Uh-oh, my browser crashed. Hmm. Okay, I'm back. Did you miss me? My entire browser crashed. I'm sorry, my entire browser crashed. Yeah. So I had to reload my browser, but we're back. Sorry about that. I'm having lots of trouble with my browser recently. I'm not sure what that's all about. Yeah. You wanna be where everybody is. Someone's all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. CG asked, did I go to the gym today? Not yet. I will go today. I go every other day is my current plan. So I didn't go yesterday, but I went the day before yesterday. So yes, I am going today. But I typically don't do it because I'm typically with you in the morning. And I don't wake up before I'm with you because I'm tired and sleep a lot. So I typically wake up about an hour before I'm on with you, and then I come on with you and do that. So yeah. So no, I haven't been to the gym yet. I will go to the gym today. It is on the agenda. Sent me an email. Let's take a look at your emails. CTY says, I hope what's in my head makes sense. Maybe an icebreaker some days. Read to us a small aspect of trial, opening argument, ruling, motion, or whatever, and then improv a horoscope for some all parties involved. Some seems fun and you can practice your improv. That's nice. I cannot tell how much I learned from you. A funny thing to me, I do now in response to drama along a family member. When I send something off the wall, I give an objection, like objection, facts, non evidence, objection, hearsay, objection, relevance, objection, argumentative. Keep on, keeping on. That's nice. I like that email. Thank you. Nice email. Thank you for your nice email. That was thoughtful. All right, let's see what we got else going on today. All right, let's cover this article. I'm not sure what we're going to get from it, but I doubt it will be part of an edited story, but we'll see what we got. Yeah, great. And thank you, by the way, to all our moderators, as always, for helping the moderation and making sure that we keep the channel a nice place to live. Okay. Apparently, I have a video overdue for attorneys react. Okay, well, apparently I have a video overdue for attorneys react, so that's annoying. All right. Well, I'll work on that. All right. All right. Let's see. Where were we? Am I going to swoop? Didn't I already swoop? I think I swooped already. Did I swoop? I could swoop again. More swoops are always good. Let's swoop again. All right. Let's see. I love you, baby. Would I make voting mandatory? That's a good question. I'd have to really think about it. I'm not sure whether that's a good idea or not. I think making the changes I propose to already make would induce more people to vote naturally because their vote would mean more. I'm not sure if I'd on top of it require people to vote. I'm not sure. I'd have to really think about it. All right, great. In what happens in Las Vegas doesn't necessarily stay in Las Vegas news. On Tuesday, there was an incident as someone smashed out a window at Caesar's Palace and tossed out some furniture from the window. And now we know more about what was actually going on. Apparently, it was part of a hotel room hostage standoff. So we got all kinds of fun and exciting things going on here in Las Vegas. Guess things are not necessarily going well over here at the Caesars. Let's learn a little bit more about this incident. A wild incident unfolded on Tuesday as someone smashed out the window at Caesar's Palace Hotel in Las Vegas and tossed out objects to the ground many stories below. Local cops say that they were holding a woman hostage. Officers resolved the matter without deaths, and we now know the suspect's name. Very exciting. The suspect has been identified as Matthew John Erman Mannix, who is 35. Police say dispatch got a report Tuesday at approximately 9:15 in the morning regarding what was initially thought to be a domestic disturbance, but turned out to be a little bit more than that. A male refused to open the door and stated that he was armed. Things are going over great here Tuesday morning in Las Vegas. Here we see a picture of the man, and we see a picture of the man in his room with the hotel room smashed out because he broke it in order to throw furniture from it to the street below. Fun and exciting. Security had put in a call for service after they had performed a welfare check on the room on the 21st floor. So apparently, security over here was a little bit concerned for some reason. Got to the door and, not all was well. So they're like, hey, police, do you mind, performing a welfare check over here? And they come to the door and things are not going great. The man, who was allegedly hostile, barricaded himself inside the room, claimed to have a firearm, and told security that he would kill someone if anyone entered the room. Going great over here in Las Vegas. If you don't end, it will. No. If you don't leave, it will end badly, he reportedly told the police. Defendant Lee allegedly taunted cops and say he had a magazine full of rounds and would pull the trigger. The cops are not going to let you resolve this without, a little bit of confrontation. A woman then yelled through the door that the man had a knife, according to authorities. This, of course, sparked a rescue operation because now he's holding a hostage. It's going great. When speaking to negotiators, he threatened the woman that if she talked to police, he would cut out her tongue. At 2:46 in the afternoon, SWAT then forced their way into the room and took him into custody. So it was a somewhat short negotiating session, and SWAT's over here like, we're tired of this bullshit, and just knocked down the door. The female who was in the room is now safe and with the officers, the police wrote. The woman told investigators she was spending the previous few days with the man, living what they called a transient lifestyle on the Las Vegas Strip. Okay. So just having a little bit of a private party here, I guess, which, Las Vegas and stuff. So, it's having a little bit of bohemian lifestyle, I guess, and it kind of went all to hell. She said that she didn't leave the room because he had a knife. The woman stated that after he smashed out the room, she was afraid that he'd throw her out of the window, which, would be a concern. So he is throwing items out the windows. Maybe one of the items he'll throw out is me. Yeah, I'd be terrified for my life too. Things are not going to go well at his criminal trial, I would imagine. Documents indicate the defendant also has a fugitive warrant from Colorado. So Colorado would like a piece of him too, but Las Vegas and Nevada probably going to have a word with him first. So Nevada would like to have a little chat with him. And then when he's done with that chat, Colorado would like to have a little chat, little conversation about how he shouldn't do certain things. And it's like you like holding people into a room? Well, what if we held you in a room for a while? Some time. It's not going great. He's being held without bond in Clark County for kidnapping and as a fugitive. Yeah, that would tend to get the court's attention. You're a fugitive from another state. I'm not thinking bond is going to be for you. He's also being held on $20,000 bond, which, is kind of moot at this point. But technically, for the charges of coercion with force or threat of force, destroying or injuring property, resisting a police officer, and disregarding safety. So yeah, you have some bond for some of your charges, but not so much for the other ones, for the kidnapping and a fugitive that will tend to get our attention. So how about we hold you in a room for the indefinite future? Thus, that brings us to the end of the article dealing with the Las Vegas hotel room standoff that involved throwing furniture out of a window. Apparently, it was part of a multi-day, transient living experience, and it didn't go well because the woman, I guess, wanted to leave at some point. The man's all like, "Nah," and started throwing stuff out the window and holding her apparently at knife point and refusing to allow her to leave. That sounds suspiciously like kidnapping. Yeah, and he threw things through the window, reckless endangerment, and engaging in terrorism basically. And also, he's wanted in another state, so things are not going to go proceeding super well for him in the near future. As Caesar has to now repair their window, at least for the moment. That brings us to the end of discussion of this story. All right, Henhouse Bath Company donates through PayPal. Thank you, Henhouse Bath Company, for your donation through PayPal. That is super fun. All right. Henhouse Bath Company, thank you for your PayPal. Tina Lewis, 99, said, whatever you're doing, don't stop. I won't. Jules Buddha donated 20 gift memberships. That's awesome. We appreciate you, Jules. Duncan, Idaho, gave $5 to ask about space in the LA Times. Not going to go well for you, I suppose. Let's Go Brandon gave $5 to ask about entrapment. We answered that question. And Duncan asked for $20 about going back in time, and we answered that question too. Jessica B is now a member for 6 months. Jessica B also gifted 5 gift memberships. Thank you very much. Let's Go Brandon hits that beautiful, beautiful join button. Sandra Ramirez gifted 10 memberships. Duncan, Idaho gifted 10 memberships. Catherine Fraser has been a member for several months. And our recurring, repeating troll who continues to harass me in both this chat and other chats has been banned through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 accounts just today. 6 accounts just today. This guy is a pain in my ass. And I don't know what I ever did to him or what his problem is, but he makes a point of not only harassing me in my own chat, but he makes a point of degrading me in any chat that I'm part of. And even sometimes when I'm not part of the chat, he just likes to degrade me and like attack me and try to get other people to dislike me. And he apparently created 6 accounts today just to continue his harassment campaign. Yeah. So our mods are right on top of it. And we are dealing with that bullshit. It's one of the reasons, incidentally, that we put a 15-second delay on the stream to help prevent, the worst of the spamming and stuff like that. So it's one of the reasons we have a 15-second delay. And it's one of the reasons we require subscriptions to try to, deal with that in its worst exercises. Yeah. And YouTube over here is doing nothing about it, by the way. So it's really fucking annoying. Let's see what we got. Okay, let's this isn't really a legal story, but let's discuss it anyway. You know. Yeah. And it's like even worse than that in a lot of ways, just to point out the obvious, He obviously is well aware that I'm a person who deals with depression. And this guy has been antagonizing me for like years at this point. And he's deliberately taken advantage of my mental health status at multiple points to try to attack me. And, so he is deliberately trying to apparently drive me deeper and deeper into depression, which, is a pretty lousy thing to do. So he has strong problems as well, you know. Oh, the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act. Someone asked about. Yeah, the evil coleslaw basically got it down. It's a prohibition on federal employees prohibiting participating in political actions, and it's a little complicated, but that's a fair description of it, among other things. So yeah, yeah. So, and we have our mods here to help to flag them under as many accounts. So, and we report it to YouTube for all the good it seems to do, but we report it. And it just seems happening. So YouTube is no help, apparently. In Elon Musk news, Elon Musk has announced a launch of a new AI company. This is somewhat expected. Elon Musk was part of the creation of OpenAI and has been somewhat displeased in how that company has conducted itself. And also, for his own reasons, wants to get involved in the AI trade because he sees it as an existential threat and hopes that he can use it in a way that will help humanity rather than harm it. So he has started to recruit people for this AI company and get invested in the AI. So let's learn a little bit more about this. Elon Musk on Wednesday announced the formation of a new company that is focused on the issue of artificial intelligence after months of teasing plans to build a rival to ChatGPT, which, a lot of companies are looking at as well. Microsoft, of course, heavily invested in this arena. As you would expect, they're a major investor in OpenAI, and Elon Musk also once again involved. The company, which is called XAI, unveiled a website and teams of dozen staffers. The new company will be led by Musk, according to the website, and work closely with X, which is Twitter's company, Tesla, and other companies that make progress towards the mission, saying the goal of XAI is to understand the true nature of the universe. So we want AI to answer the great question. We already know what the answer to the great question is. The answer to the great question is 42, but we'll develop an AI to help confirm that to be true. Musk was an early backer of OpenAI, but later criticized the company for inputting safeguards that aim to provide the viral chatbot from spewing various responses. So, yeah, the coercion of the AI to only provide woke answers is a little bit annoying. The danger of training AI to be woke, that is the lie, is deadly. And so he is really, really concerned that training the AI on how to lie in order to provide preferred answers might go bad for some reason. Can't see how that could become a problem. Yeah, no, he's on it. In an interview with Tucker Carlson, Musk said that he planned on generating something that he would call Truth GPT, which is the maximum truth seeking AI that cares about understanding the universe. So he wants to create an AI that's based. He wants to create an AI that actually just understands facts and tries to provide actual truth. Capital T truth. That sounds like a good thing. I look forward to that. Musk has announced the plans months after he warned in an interview that he thinks AI could cause civilization destruction, which he's been saying that for quite a long time for anyone who's paid any attention to Musk. He's been warning about the dangers of AI for quite some time. So apparently people are just starting to pay attention, but he's like, this is a real problem. And, he's really concerned about how it could go wrong because the amount of ways it could go wrong is probably much greater than the ways it could go right. And you probably only get one try at it. So he's a little bit concerned about it. So he's joined other tech leaders in calling for a pause of how to control AI, but that probably won't happen because governments tend to only be responsive, and by the time it's responsive, it'll be too late. So he thinks he needs to get involved and get involved now. Few other details of the company's mission are immediately available, but the website indicates it's actively recruiting staff. At the moment, the dozen of staff on the website appear to be men. Okay, so we're getting this company just started and it's all men. Well, wow, that's a shocker. In addition to Twitter and, of course, this new XAI company, he runs several other companies, including Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, Boring Company, and a whole bunch of others. So, unclear how Musk will further continue to divide his resources as a person. He seems to have a relentless appetite for working, though, and working like crazy. But still, he's one man. So, how he's going to do it all, I don't know. But of course, Musk recently turned over Twitter, at least ostensibly, to a new CEO. So maybe he's trying to back down in favor of other interests, but we'll see. Thus, that brings us to the end of the story about Elon Musk starting a new AI company, which should be really interesting to see how that develops. I look forward to the media saying how this is a far right AI, far right QAnon conspiracy AI, and all the rest of it as he tries to develop something that actually speaks truth, which I know is amazing. But he wants it to be a truth focused AI that actually just tries to figure out what the universe is actually like in reality. The truth sometimes has been described as having a right wing bias. So, I look forward to that. And that, for the moment, brings us to the end of discussion of this story. Here in my car, I feel safest of all. I unlock all my doors. All right. Let's see what we want to do next. All right. All right. I don't know if I really want to cover the story, but I guess I'm doing it anyway. So we'll get. Well, all right. I probably won't make the edit. So we'll do this story though for the sake of it because I had it planned and why not? All right. In rule number one of firearms is the firearm is always loaded news. A woman has been arrested for apparently accidentally shooting her mom in the head while trying to show her the firearm was not loaded. The firearm was loaded. Probably don't point the firearm at anything you don't intend to destroy. Probably don't pull the trigger until you're ready to fire. The gun is always loaded. Some basic problems here. So don't do that. Let's learn a little bit more about this story. Uh, John Doe, if you have a copy of Rikita's motion or the order from the judge, I'll cover it. I don't have it. So if you have it, if you could submit it to put it in the Discord or something, that'd be great. And I'll take a look at it. We can talk about it. For all value it has. I don't have anything better to really talk about, so why not? A 19-year-old woman in Texas was arrested last week after she allegedly shot her 50-year-old mother in the head with a 40 caliber handgun by accident, trying to claim that she was showing the woman the weapon was not loaded. By pointing it at her and apparently pulling the trigger, one would notice. Crystal Lisette Marr was taken into custody and charged with one count of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, which, could be upped to other charges because this seems like reckless murder. So how about manslaughter or even murder potentially? So yeah, but we're charging him with the count of aggravated assault for the moment. According to the report, officers with Laredo Police Department responded to a 911 call about 3:30 in the morning, which sounds like a bad time to try to confirm that a weapon is unloaded to me, about a shooting. The caller reportedly said her daughter had just shot her in the head. So apparently she didn't immediately die from it. She was still living and was living long enough to make a 911 call. But, it didn't end well. Once there, the medics found the mother and began providing treatment, noting that she was conscious and talkative. She was then taken for additional treatment to a medical center. In an interview with did she kill her? Oh, I just assumed she was dead. Oh, she's not dead. Oh, never mind. Okay, she shot her in the head, but she's still living. And apparently able to talk and stuff. Oh, that's why it's not murder. At least yet. If she dies, though, maybe. Okay, well, that kind of screws up that story. So apparently she was shot in the head with a 40 caliber bullet and lived to tell the tale. She removed the magazine, but then pressed the trigger. Well, okay, that's the end of that story. All right, so apparently you get shot in the head and call 911. Apparently that's a thing. So where's this thing from Rikita? Does anyone have a copy? Yeah, fully AI created channel is an interesting idea. If you could get it, yeah, that's an interesting idea. That some people are trying that. Apparently, Rikita had his motion to dismiss denied, and I assume there's an order from a court that says that. So Rikita had his motion against Monograph denied, and I thought we could cover it. So if anyone has a copy of the court order, I thought we could cover it. That'd be fun. He went through it last night on stream. Well, that doesn't do me any good. I'll ask in his Discord real fast and see if anyone has it. You got it? You're uploading it Discord? Kick ass. Go over it. It's Minnesota, right? I can probably pull it straight from the docket now that I think about it. Okay, let's see. Rikita, right? If I do Nick, will it just pop up? No. Is it Nicholas? Nicholas Rikita. That's probably not the guy. Steve Quest versus Nicholas Rikita. Rikita Law. Oh no! Did Nick get a traffic conviction? Oh no! Date of birth 81. Is that right? That doesn't sound right. Maybe it is right. Yeah. Okay. What did Nick do in the past? Speed 65 zone, non-interstate 80 65, convicted of petty misdemeanor. Oh, Nick. Oh, dear. Fine of $60, fees of $90. Man, they're mean over there. Driver was westbound in lane of US 71 near milepost 124, visually fast. A visually estimating driver speed coming around the curve at about 80 in a 65. I activated my front radar antenna from a stationary position, clocked at 80 and 81, locking in at 81 and a 65. Had good, clear, high audible, steady Doppler tone. Upon stop, driver stated, bring bring child to speech meet. It did not know he was going that fast. Driver say he wasn't paying attention. Issued citation for going 80 and a 65. Raining, wet, cloudy. Dun dun dun. That apparently was that was apparently April 2023. Nick Speeder confirmed. Exciting. All right. Thank you for the case number. I'll look it up. I was too busy looking at Nick's speeding record. Let's see, case number. Let's pull this up. All right, find this. Yeah, there it is. Steve Quest versus Nick Rikita. Exciting. All right, what do we got here? Filing of order and judgment. Judgment. All right. Let's take a look at this. What is this other order? Let's see. Special motion to dismiss. Okay, it's order denied, denied. Then there's memorandum. And then, what the hell's this thing then? Is this the same thing, just entered twice? Okay. Yeah, it's entered twice for some reason on the docket. All right, let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at Nick Rikita by Steve Quest. Exciting. All right. Let's take a look. Take a look. It's in a book. Reading Rainbow. I can do anything. Friends to go, ways to go. Reading Rainbow. Reading Rainbow. All right. I'm hungry. All right, let's take a look at this. Who's calling me and why? I don't know why someone's calling me right now. All right, so this is special motion to dismiss, which is denied. They can move for summary judgment upon completion discovery. Let judgment be entered. Very exciting. All right, Nick. This is a case for defamation as well as both intentional and negligent infliction of emotional distress. Quest claims that Rikita made false defamatory statements about him over the course of 6 videos between October 2022 and January 2023. He asserts in these videos Rikita insulted him using coarse language and slurs, and that Rikita called him the P word. Rikita moves to dismiss on the basis of Colorado's anti-SLAPP legislation, claiming that Colorado law is more substantially related to the Quest claims, and the lawsuit is frivolous, intending to chill Rikita's speech. Both Quest and Rikita have submitted flurries of evidence, almost all of which indicates they were engaged in a vulgar online shouting match. Both have called each other abhorrent names and made rude jokes at the other's expense. However, very little of the evidence on record relates to an actual claim of defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, or negligent infliction. Even so, claims of P word are serious and treated by Minnesota courts as a matter of defamation per se, which is not atypical, by the way, because you are making a claim about someone's sexual virtue, which is a defamation per se kind of issue. So that's not unusual. Further, while there's currently a lack of evidence to support the claims of intentional negligent infliction of emotional distress, it's improper to grant summary judgment here because the window for discovery is yet to close. Therefore, the motion is premature. Okay, so we're moving for summary judgment and it's just early. While summary judgment is improper at this time, it may be reconsidered once they have the ability to develop the record. Okay, so is this a motion to dismiss or a motion for summary judgment? Well, they say it's a motion to dismiss. And then okay, so they move for both summary judgment and dismissal? All right. All right, factual background. Both parties have achieved relatively significant success as public figures on the internet. All right, Nick. I mean, fair enough. So the court thinks you're a public figure. Okay. I don't know necessarily that's necessarily a give me, by the way, but this court thinks it, but fine. Quest received attention for creating, directing, and publishing videos online through his YouTube channel under the username Monograph. He also goes by the online username of October Reigns. His content ranges from potentially satirical and ridiculous to unsettling. So the court thinks that Monograph is ridiculous at times. That's funny. Rikita is an attorney who also produces content that discusses topical legal issues in the form of pre-recorded videos and video streams. Rikita describes his content as commentary that aims to be both informative and comedic and compares it to late night shock radio. Yeah, definitely more so than me. That's for sure. Nick has a much more wild appetite for such things. While creating this content, Rikita drinks, employs coarse language, slurs, and makes off-color jokes. Quest admits that Rikita's content focuses on hyperbole and commentary. Yeah. In the amended complaint, Quest identifies 6 instances in which he alleges that Rikita made defamatory statements. First, he alleges that Rikita was a guest on a live stream in which he made various false statements of a sexual nature about him, which would potentially be defamation per se. Quest additionally claims that Rikita appeared in a video published in October in which he accused Quest of P-word, asserting that he enjoyed doing P-word relating things. In the same video, Rikita say that Quest should probably be shot in the fucking head, and then calling him a P-word something something. Yeah, that's okay. Quest further claims that Rikita appeared in a video published in October in which the host presented an image of Quest with guns pointed at him. Okay. In another video published in October, Quest asserts that Rikita accused him of making a snuff film involving a minor child in which Quest threatened the child both with abuse and violence. In a 5th video, Quest claims that Rikita referred to him as R-word and challenged him to file a lawsuit stating that Quest's reputation was so poor there could be no damages. So defamation proof is the idea, which, is an affirmative defense, I suppose. So the idea is that his reputation is so bad, he literally can't be defamed anymore, which, is a possibility, to be sure. I don't know if it's true here or not, but it is legally at least arguable. Okay. Finally, Quest claims that Rikita further referred to him as an R-word in a video published in January. Quest alleges that these statements made by Rikita on these 6 occasions injured his reputation and character so as to negatively impact his relationship with others in the community. Quest does not provide specific examples of this injury, although that's not required at this stage, of course, if it's defamation per se, because you don't have to allege damages. That's the nation what makes it defamation per se. The brief in support of the special motion to dismiss admits that he referred to Quest on these various occasions as various terms. He doesn't dispute that he claimed that Quest directed a snuff film that was named Little Piggy and the Umbrella Man, which he starred alongside a minor child. Okay. I don't know anything about that. That is well outside my knowledge base, so I have no information to offer as to factual basis on that. On the IMDb page for this film, Monograph is listed as director and actor playing an R word. In October 28, 2022, Rikita addressed Quest directly, stating that he has an image problem. Additionally, he referred to past statements regarding the potential P word, saying that kid stuff was joke stuff, and a reasonable person could form the opinion that Quest is a P word based on the movie Little Piggy and the Umbrella Man. I offer no opinion as to any of this. I haven't seen the movie. I don't know much about Monograph. I have no opinion and no basis in fact to understand any of these things. This is well outside my knowledge base, and I don't want to know. That's I have no interest in learning that, to be quite honest. So I'll just note that I don't know. Rikita brings the special motion to dismiss under Colorado law anti-SLAPP legislation that aims to encourage and safeguard constitutional rights of persons to petition, speak freely, associate freely, and otherwise participate in government. Essentially, the law aims to discourage meritless lawsuits that would otherwise discourage individuals from participating in free speech and public life. Pertinent to this case, the law protects defendants who make any written or oral statement of writing made in a place open to the public or public forum in connection with an issue of public interest, which that last part is sort of legally operative, right? Because we're talking about stuff that would be subject to the elevated standard of defamation. So we're talking about what would be like public figure. So we seem to be talking about like public interest in that same vein. So if it's in that higher category of speech, other conduct or communication furtherance of the exercise of a constitutional right to petition or the constitutional right of free speech in connection with a public issue or an issue of public interest. Again, this is legally operative language, like public interest, public issue, public figure is all things that kind of go together in the same breath when you're talking about this sort of thing. So normally if you're thinking public figure, public interest, public issue, you're thinking to yourself, you need recklessness. And Colorado says in that situation, not even reckless will do. Apparently. Further, the statute, well, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's at least the domain of stuff they're talking about. Further, the statute provides the court must determine whether the plaintiff establishes there's a reasonable likelihood they will prevail. There is scant law addressing the motion analysis. One trial court provided a framework for addressing the motion and adopting California law due to the similarity between Colorado and California, which you know is okay in the first instance. Colorado is free to inform its law by parallel to other laws, right? That's what we call informative precedent, right? It's informative. Colorado can ignore it or can look to it or can adopt it as it pleases. So a Colorado court apparently trying to figure out what the hell this language means looks to language in California. It's like, okay, the language in California is similar, so I'm going to adopt this California decision and go from there, which, you know, fair enough. That's a lot of how courts think. Yeah, fair enough. In the analysis, the trial court engages in a two-step process. First, the court decides where defendants made a threshold showing the challenge cause of action is one arising from protected activity. If that, then it determines whether the plaintiff has demonstrated probability of winning. And this is also, by the way, and it's worthy of note here, this is from some district decision in Colorado, which also is not binding authority even in Colorado. Because a trial court, unless Colorado says otherwise, and I doubt it does, trial courts do not provide binding authority because there's no one to bind. It's a trial court decision, right? So, and also trial courts are not even bound by themselves. So they can issue inconsistent decisions from case to case, right? Unless you have a decision from the Court of Appeals, right? Decisions from district courts are not precedential or not binding precedent. So they're informative even as to Colorado. So they're like this is tenuous, might be another way of thinking about it, right? So it's like, so the court in Minnesota is trying to determine what Colorado law, and Colorado law is thin. So that's not a great position for the Minnesota court to be in, because the Minnesota court, to the extent it's applying Colorado law, is forced to apply the law that Colorado would apply. Minnesota doesn't have any power to determine Colorado law. Colorado has power to determine Colorado law. So Minnesota has to try to figure out what the Colorado courts would do in the absence of anything, not a fun position for a court to be in. Because, like, let me put aside the Minnesota books and open the Colorado books, but there's nothing in the Colorado books. So, not a great time. And the only time the Colorado books seem to be open is let's open the California books. So, am I opening the California books? Is that what I'm doing now? I feel for the court a little bit in this position. All right, Rikita admits even if this court were to apply the law, which is a whole nother thing altogether, because what Colorado law is and whether it should apply here is a separate issue, by the way. So even if we decide that it should apply, first of all, what the hell is it? But then does it apply? That it would be equivalent to a motion for summary judgment, which, yeah, or a motion to dismiss, take your pick, either way. Summary judgment is proper if there's no issues of material fact and the moving parties entitled to emotional judgment. In considering for a motion for summary judgment, a court cannot weigh on the evidence, make credibility determination, or attempt to determine the truth. Sounds about right. To defeat a motion for summary judgment, the opposing party must set forth showing that there's an issue for trial, and the court must view the evidence in the light most favorable to and making all reasonable inferences from the non-moving party. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn. But hasn't Rikita previously expressed doubt about anti-SLAPP laws and their legal viability in the first instance? Because I could be wrong, and maybe my memory is failing me, but I was under the impression that Rikita didn't believe in anti-SLAPP laws, that he thought that they were invalid. And am I having a brain fart moment? Because I was under the impression that Rikita didn't believe in anti-SLAPP and thought it was unconstitutional. So that doesn't, I don't, I don't, that seems hypocritical. That seems hypocritical to some degree. If Rikita believes that anti-SLAPP is invalid, then he doesn't have to invoke anti-SLAPP. There's nothing forcing him to invoke it. He doesn't have to invoke it. If he really truly believes that anti-SLAPP is invalid, why is he trying to invoke it? Shouldn't he have the conviction of his own principles and be like, I don't really believe in this? So why is he he's trying to invoke it for his own benefit, by the way. That's what the problem is, right? If he were representing a client, I would totally get it, right? Because he's representing someone else and wants to do the best he can for that client. So I would totally get it if he was representing someone else and invoking anti-SLAPP for them, because then he would be like, I don't agree with this law, but it's in the interest of my client and I have a duty to my client. But here his only duties are to himself and he can ignore it if he wants to, right? So if he doesn't believe in it, why is he invoking it? Why is he invoking the protection of something he doesn't believe in? Seems a little bit problematic. Yeah. If the law allows it, though, why not use it? Because he doesn't believe in it. He didn't write it, his lawyer did. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. Fair point. His lawyer represented it. Okay, so question is, did he go to his lawyer and say, I don't want you to invoke this? And his lawyer said, no, I'm going to invoke it anyway, which technically can be a thing the lawyer could do. So is Nick saying that my lawyer is doing this over my own protest? Because technically speaking, his lawyer could do that ethically. A lawyer's duty is to further the ultimate goal of the client, but the lawyer's strategy is to the client. So technically speaking, Nick could go to his lawyer and be like, I'd like to not be liable for defamation. And be like, I understand that. My goal as your lawyer is for you to not be held liable for defamation. That is my goal. And then Nick could say, I don't want you to invoke anti-SLAPP. And his lawyer can be like, nah, I'm going to invoke anti-SLAPP. Right? If you don't like it, fire me. And he can do that. That's ethical for an attorney to do. That's ethical. The client sets the goal, not the means to the goal. So strictly speaking, technically speaking, Rikita can say, my goal is to not be sued for defamation. And lawyer said, great, you're the client, you set the goal. You want to not be sued for defamation. I agree. And then he can go to the lawyer and be like, I'd like you to not invoke anti-slap. And the lawyer can be like, nah, fam, I'm all about the anti-slap light. Get bent. So my question is that what happened? Did Nick go to his attorney and be like, you know what? I just don't believe in anti-slap. It is not something I believe in. I think they're unconstitutional. I don't really agree with anti-slap. I know the courts say that there's anti-slap, but I think the courts are full of shit. And it's not something we have to invoke, which is true. We don't have to invoke it. And I want you to not invoke it. I know it's something that could further my case, but I don't want you to invoke it because I don't believe it. And the lawyer went like, nah, fam, I'm all about that life. Screw you. Is that what happened? Does Nick have a moral problem with this? And if not, why not? Why doesn't Nick have a moral problem with this? Why is Nick's position being, I really didn't want to invoke the anti-slap. I really wish my attorney didn't do that, but he's, really, really good. He's really, really good. And I really, really wish he did. Ah, damn it. I really wish he didn't do that. Or is Nick okay with this? So, and we're back to hypocrisy position. Incidentally, for what it's worth, why don't I ask Nick? Why don't I ask him directly? Well, Michael, not that it's any of your business. And by the way, thank you back, Andrew Son, for being here once again. But this is my first time reading it cold. So I guess I will ask Nick at some point. But I'm asking the question because I'm reading it cold and reacting to it as one does. Also, go fuck yourself. We don't want you here. Yeah. You think his position is that the law, as long as it helped me, why not use it? I'm not sure that that's fully tenable as an ethics position. Because what do you really believe in? Like, what do you really believe in? So you don't really believe in anti-slap, but as long as it's there to help you, you'll take advantage of it. It's like, then I'm not, okay. That seems ethically questionable. I have questions. That seems, yeah. Nick doesn't agree with the decision to try to use it, but acknowledges it would benefit him. Then I think if that's true, then I think Nick is being a bit of a hypocrite. If Nick really believes the Colorado law is wrong and isn't going to his attorney and be like, I don't want you to use the Colorado law because I believe it's wrong, then then he's willing to put his sides for his own convenience. Principles don't matter very much if you're willing to put them aside for your own convenience, right? Principles are principles. You either believe in it as a principle or you don't. It's like, yeah, it's a principle, but when it benefits me, though, right? This is the problem of so much hypocrisy. This is the problem of so much problems on the left, right? This is the problem of a lot of progressive thinking. It's like, this is a problem because I see a lot of left-leaning people where, at least in my opinion, they don't apply principles when it's convenient to them. They don't really have principles, right? The principles only exist as a power tool, right? And I've seen this when it comes to feminism. I've seen this when it comes to trans rights issues. I've seen this when it comes to any number of issues, freedom of speech, any number of issues on the left, right? It's like, I really believe in it. I really believe in it, except when it comes and applies to me, then I don't believe in it anymore. You see this in California, for example. Yeah, we want more housing. We want more housing for the homeless, but not like that. It will decrease my property values. We want more rights for this, but not like that. It will hurt me in this way. So, hypocrisy is, a real problem. And to the extent that he is taking advantage of something he doesn't believe in, it makes you at least question whether or not he really believes in it in a principle, right? Do you really believe in this as a principle? Or I suppose maybe you've re-examined your principles. Maybe he's changed his principle, which is also fine, by the way. That would be a way to resolve the tension. Now that it's come, but you see, all right, yes, like, yeah, now that I've seen the light, I understand. But I'm as a philosophy guy really attracted to Kant, right? I like Immanuel Kant, and I think Immanuel Kant kind of goes too far in the extreme, but I kind of agree with him. It's like Immanuel Kant says, among other things, that there is no ethical position except a position which you can maximize without contradiction. The only thing that's ethical is a position that you can take and apply it universally, categorically. Categorical is the only ethics. And so I think he takes this to an extreme, but he I think he has a very strong point. And he might even be right in the extreme, but in the other extremes it gets very, very uncomfortable. When you really push Kant to the absolute limit, which Kant, by the way, is very clear that he wants to be pushed to the absolute limit, so it's not like straw manning him. Kant wants to be pushed to the limit. It's very clear he does. But when you push him to the absolute limit, it does become really uncomfortable. But like, this is not really compatible with Kantian philosophy, right? You can't really say, I don't believe in it, but I'm going to invoke it when it's convenient for me. Because now you're violating your principle for mere convenience, which Kant definitely would repudiate. Kant's over here like, you can't lie to the Nazis when they knock on the door asking where the Jews are. That's how far Kant goes. Because Kant's like, it's wrong to lie. And someone asked him in his own time, by the way, they asked him in his own time, like, what if a murderer comes to the door and demands to know where a person is, and it just so happens that person is currently in refuge in your house? Can you lie to the murderer knocking at your door who wants to know where the guy is, and the guy is currently at your house? Can you lie to that guy? And Kant said, no, you can't lie to him. That's how far Kant wants to go. Okay. So he's definitely not going to say it's okay if, it's merely a little inconvenient and personally uncomfortable. So, yeah. So Kant is being a little bit, so he is not employing a Kantian ethic. Yeah. Kant, K-A-N-T, Kant. Immanuel Kant, that's his name. So yeah, so there it is. I would respectfully suggest that Nick is in tension with Kantian ethics. All right, let's see. Both parties acknowledge that Minnesota previously had an anti-SLAPP law that was found to be unconstitutional, which is presumably a position that Nick likes. The court in a prior case explained that Minnesota's anti-SLAPP statute cannot be applied in a manner consistent with the constitutional right to a jury trial because statutes requiring pretrial factual determinations require to step into the role of the jury. Now that Minnesota has found its own anti-SLAPP law unconstitutional, Rikita appeals to Colorado law. That's Nick is my friend, and I hope will continue to be my friend after this. I really do. But that's a little ethically questionable, my friend. If you really believe that these laws are unconstitutional, unless you believe Colorado's law is constitutional for some reason. So if you believe Colorado's version of this is constitutional, then, okay. You'll have to explain to me why Colorado's version is constitutional and Minnesota's laws isn't, I guess. But if you believe it's constitutional, then I let you off the hook. You'll have to explain to me why, though. But if you believe these are unconstitutional, that one law was found unconstitutional, now you appeal to a backup because it's convenient, though. I have some problems here. I have some problems. I might have to have Nick on and challenge him because I don't know what. Yeah, this seems questionable. In a case where the relevant law is in dispute, the court must employ a choice of law analysis to decide which to apply. Fair enough. When deciding choice of law issues, the district court sitting in diversity generally applies the choice of rules of the forum state, which is true. Fair enough, yes. In Minnesota, the first step of resolving the conflict is to determine whether choosing the law of one state over another would be outcome determinative. In this case, because Colorado has an anti-SLAPP statute that provides immunity, choice of law is outcome determinative, which and then they say Minnesota law applies. Yeah, I don't. Oh, Nick, what is going on, Nick? Once a conflict is found, Minnesota courts evaluate 5 conflict choice influencing factors: the predictability of the result, maintenance of interstate and international order, simplification of judicial tasks, advancement of the foreign government's interests, and application of the better rule of law. These factors are not overwrought rules, but rather tools. While prior opinions may be helpful, the court's obligation is to be true to the method rather than seek superficial analogies. Fair. First, predictability of results embodies the idea that litigation on the same facts, regardless of where the litigation occurs, should be decided the same to avoid forum shopping. Also fair. However, this factor applies primarily to consensual transactions where the parties desire advance notice of which state law will govern. While it's possible forum shopping occurred in this case, with Quest choosing Minnesota as a forum state due to its anti-SLAPP, well, also Nick lives there, so it is a case, it's a court of general jurisdiction. So could Quest sue Nick in his home state? Questionable. Questionable when it comes to personal jurisdiction, right? So Quest, if he tried to sue him in his home state, Nick would be claiming personal jurisdiction, one would think, and Nick would probably be right. So Quest, being somewhat smart about it, says, let me sue him in Minnesota because it solves the jurisdiction issue. There is no agreement or anticipation of further relationship. The parties do not voluntarily associate. Instead, they were thrust in this conduct through public discourse. The favor applies applying Minnesota law over Colorado. Second, maintenance of interstate order concerns where application of one state's law would be manifestly disrespectful for another state's sovereign. Evidence of forum shopping or application of Minnesota law would promote forum shopping, which indicates disrespect. In this case, applying Minnesota law could certainly incentivize forum shopping, allowing plans from states with anti-SLAPP to file Minnesota. Since Minnesota found its anti-SLAPP unconstitutional, defendants do not have statutory rights to chill the exercise of speech. If plaintiffs were attempting to intimidate defendant through legal action, Minnesota would be preferable. In this case, the factor falls to Colorado. The third factor is often considered insignificant because courts can easily apply another state law as their own. Yeah, that I tend to agree with, right? It shouldn't be that hard, as long as the law is defined. If it's not defined, it becomes harder. But, it shouldn't be that big a deal for a Minnesota court to apply a Colorado case because, judges read decisions all the time. It's not like, Colorado isn't that foreign. Although the case is insignificant, it applies to Minnesota because obviously a Minnesota court is going to be a little bit more familiar with Minnesota law. Fourth, advancement of a forum general government's interest involves analysis where a choice of law would involve significant forum state. Factor ensures that Minnesota courts are not required to apply laws or rule inconsistent with the concept of fairness and equity. Applying Colorado here would contravene Minnesota's interest in fairness and equity. It isn't that Minnesota has never enacted anti-SLAPP, it did, but we decided it was unconstitutional. This isn't a case where another state's law can fill in a void because there is no void, right? This is something Minnesota's decided doesn't work for us. Minnesota courts have spoken clearly that the anti-SLAPP is unconstitutional. As such, where it would require a pretrial factual determination. As such, Minnesota has made a determination regarding state interest that anti-SLAPP laws are suspect. And so Colorado's law might be in violation of our Constitution, and it's our Constitution in our state. Finally, the fifth factor is irrelevant. Plus, also, although not mentioned here, this is the state in which Nick lives. So Nick is being judged by his own state's law. So how unfair can that be, right? Nick is being sued in the state in which he lives. So there's no problem with fundamental fairness. If anything, Quest is at a disadvantage. So unmentioned here, yeah. Nick is not entitled to summary judgment. Regardless of other vulgar names, the accusations of P word are among the most valid claims because they're defamation per se. They can be, for sure. Statements are defamation per se if they falsely accuse another person of a crime, having a loathsome disease, or unchastity. All that stuff, yes. Following the rule, courts have held that statements accusing a person of serious sexual misconduct are defamation per se. In determining defamation per se, the court must analyze whether a reasonable person, this is key here, so pay attention. In determining defamation per se, the court must analyze whether a reasonable person in similar circumstances would understand the statement as making an accusation or imputing serious or similar misconduct. So this part is key, because you can make a statement. This is incidentally like key both ways. So you can make a statement that appears to be a statement of fact, but not understood as a statement of fact, right? So if you just read the transcript, as it were, it would appear as a statement of fact, but based on other statements, based on other surrounding context, based on tone of voice, based on other things, it would not be understood as a statement of fact. So you can have something that superficially appears like a statement of fact, but would not be reasonably understood as a statement of fact. Another example, by the way, of this would be where the statement is so hyperbolic that no one could understand it as a statement of fact, right? It's so crazy, so absurd, no one could understand it as real, right? So that's another example. A statement that seems superficially like a statement of fact, but is so hyperbolic, so over the top, that no reasonable person would understand it. So that's one example. Another example is where overall context makes it clear it's not intended as a statement of fact. And you can also have the exact reverse of that. You can have a statement that appears to be a statement of opinion, but is in fact a statement of fact because of overall context, right? So it's not enough to say, well, merely in my opinion, person X is Y, right? In overall context, that might be understood as a statement of fact. So this is really key. Would a reasonable person understand the statement as making an accusation of fact, namely imputing criminal serious misconduct? So yeah, that's really important. Courts go beyond this, however, stating, we hold that in almost every circumstance, a reasonable listener would believe that calling a person a P word imputes serious sexual misconduct or criminal activity. Which, fair enough, right? There are some circumstances in which you would not understand it that way. But, the courts are thinking that, being labeled a P word is particularly dangerous to one's reputation, which, there's not much worse in this world than being accused of being a P word. I think, that's pretty reasonable. So it's a pretty charged word, as one would anticipate. So is there some situation in which a reasonable listener would not understand it to be a statement of fact, or would understand it to be so hyperbolic in context to the person or other context does not apply as a statement of fact? Yes. There is some situations out there on the edge, but not so much in most situations, because most of the time it's understood as a statement of fact, or would be understood as a reasonable listener, the reasonably prudent, ordinary person, the man off the street, what would they understand? They could understand it as a statement of fact. The reasonable person standard in this question is the context of fact, which, fair enough. Ask a jury whether it was intended that way. How do you know? How do you know if a reasonable person would understand it? Ask a reasonable person. Ask 12 reasonable people. That's how we typically do this. Even though Rikita acknowledged in this video that the statements were joke stuff, the strongest language of case law supports construing the actions of P word as defamation per se. In almost every circumstance, a reasonable viewer would understand. Yeah. So again, like, it's not merely enough for the disclaimer. This is kind of like what the court is talking about, right? It's not merely enough to say, this is my opinion. It's not merely enough to say it's a joke, right? Because you can imagine, like, we're not going to just let someone off the hook with a disclaimer, right? Oh, this is just a joke, just joke, but just a joke, right? Unless you would understand, right? It's not enough to say the words, it's a joke, because you could imagine someone not interpreting as a joke, or their statement, it's a joke, to be itself the joke. But the statement's really true. And which of those realities are you in is a statement of fact. So all that stuff makes sense, right? So we, as a matter of policy, are loath to dismiss this out the gate. We, as a matter of policy, understand this word to be particularly loathsome. We, as a matter of policy, are loath to just simply set someone off the hook because they simply said joke stuff. So there is more here for a reasonable jury to potentially do. So that makes sense. That makes sense. It's logical. It's coherent. Yeah. It might be 6 reasonable people in Minnesota for civil cases. That's fair, John Doe. Maybe it is 6 reasonable people, but either way, ask a unspecified group of reasonable people. Yeah. It might be 6 people. You might be right. Was it said with malice? Well, I don't know. And that gets into whether or not he is a public figure or not, which the court has at least teed up the possibility that he's a public figure, but I'm not going to take a position right now as to whether or not either of these people are public figures. I'm not going to take a position on that right now. So you might also have to prove malice, which means either Nick knows it to be a lie, which seems impossible, or he recklessly disregarded the truth, which is difficult to prove. So I'm not sure whether the elevated standard is required here or not, but the court has at least teed open the possibility that it's required. So we'll move on for the moment. In Minnesota, emotional harm resulting from defamation requires there be some reputational damage. True. That's fine. Emotional courts have exercised historic caution recognizing emotional distress claims, and emotional damages are not compensatable absent harm to reputation. In short, there's what reasonable person would choose to live in Minnesota? We'll let that go by. The citizens of the great state of Minnesota believe that they are reasonable people, and for the purposes of the law, they are. So we'll let them sit there in their sovereign right to be citizens of the state of Minnesota, and move on. In short, there's reputational damages prerequisite to emotional damages and actions for defamation. At this point, Quest has not shown reputational damages, which he doesn't have to prove in the first instance because, again, defamation per se. Well, yeah. The only evidence of reputational damage is a video supposedly showing Rikita devotees following him. The video, however, does not show a person trailing Quest. It does not contain evidence the person had any connection to Rikita. It doesn't even show Quest. Well, that's not very helpful, is it? The lack of evidence of reputational harm at this point of litigation, however, may be cured through discovery, which is led to conclude. So the court's like, yeah, there's not any evidence right now, but I'm going to let this press on to discovery, which, fair. The motion for summary judgment is premature. Adequate time for discovery is essential to show that the claims are not unjustly thrown out before they had a top ability to produce evidence. As a general rule, summary judgment is only proper after non-movement has adequate time for discovery. In the present case, they opposed summary judgment on the ground, claiming the motion is procedurally defective, and summary judgment could not be supported at this stage of litigation because the factual record is not adequately developed. This is correct. Although Quest does not yet provide substantial evidence of finding damage, there's a possibility that he might be able to. Fair enough. The court wants to let it go to discovery and see what he can turn up, and then be like, if there's no evidence here, the court can say there's no evidence here. But he's like, it's a word that is particularly charged, and so we'll give you a little bit more opportunity to find it. Makes sense. Although Quest does not provide evidence as of yet, there's a possibility he could before the window of discovery. The accusations of P-word were severe, even if made with comedic intent and tone. These are a type of accusations that would inspire anger, distrust, and negative consequences. Further discovery is concluded summary judgment's improper. That makes sense. That makes sense at this stage. The court could have gone the other way, I think, to be fair. But this decision's also unreasonable, or possible also reasonable. What's interesting here, by the way, as a matter of just talking about it, the court could have probably gone the other way and probably been within the bounds of discretion. And that might be something that makes people a little bit uncomfortable at times, but there is a matter of judgment here, and courts of appeal are loath to overturn trial courts, in the absence of clear error or abuse of discretion. So if the court went the other way, the Court of Appeals probably would uphold that too, to be quite honest. So it's like, well, it's a judgment. It's literally a judgment call. And the judge thinks there's enough to go through, and that's probably correct. And if the judge went exactly the opposite way, that'd probably be correct too. Is the question, like, from an appellate posture would be like, basically, is this so absurd that it can't stand? And the answer is probably no, either way. It's probably within the bounds of judgment either way. Nick's position is that Colorado statute doesn't have the non-severable unconstitutional position that Minnesota anti-SLAPP had law. Well, if that's true, Scott, then that resolves the tension. If that's true, that resolves the tension. If I understood Nick's criticism, and this is why I went to some pains in my discussion to say, like, I don't know if I completely understood Nick's position. I was like, I'm not sure if I'm getting this right, because I just understood it very vaguely. But if Nick's position is a more nuanced position, which I didn't understand, then I would obviously change my analysis. Changing facts changes analysis. This is good to do, right? Changing facts changes analysis. So if Nick's position isn't just generally I oppose anti-SLAPP, but a more nuanced position of Minnesota's is unconstitutional for this particular reason, and Colorado doesn't have that particular problem, therefore Colorado's version is constitutional, even Minnesota is not, that would be a logically coherent thing to do. So if that's his position, then fine. And obviously there's no hypocrisy at that point, right? Because he isn't disagreeing with it he isn't taking two sides of the same issue. If his position is anti-SLAPP is only unconstitutional if ... and Minnesota had that problem, and at that point, Scott, would be whether that was his position before he got involved in this lawsuit. How recent is that? How recent is that belief? Would be my only question. So if Nick had that belief before this ever came to be, then that would be one thing. If Nick had previously taken the position that these anti-SLAPP laws are generally unconstitutional, and only as a result of this issue has taken the more nuanced position that we're going to separate the difference, I would question whether or not he truly has been converted or whether or not he's engaging in special pleading. Am I gone? Am I back? What's happening now? Fuck. Am I here? God damn it. Am I back? Fuck. God damn it. I'll wait till the buffering is over because I don't want to be mistaken. I'll wait till the buffering is over and I'll repeat myself because I don't want to be misunderstood. And I don't know how much of it got buffered in or buffered out. Am I back? Am I here? Is it all working now? I'll restate my position. Am I all back? Okay. Then in that case, I'll restate my position just because I don't want anything to have been lost in the buffering. So I'll just state my position so that I'm clear, because I want to be as clear as I can be for obvious reasons, right? So if Nick has the position that Minnesota's version is unconstitutional, but Colorado's is not because of some part of the statute, then that would be fine, right? He wouldn't be a hypocrite then, because he would be distinguishing it based on a factor that would be understandable. So it would be yeah, there's different versions of the same statute that might be constitutional or not, right? So for Nick as a lawyer to take the position that Minnesota's version is unconstitutional, so but Colorado's is not, is at least philosophically tenable. So if Nick's position wasn't I don't like anti-SLAPP in general, if that wasn't his position, but rather I dislike certain versions of anti-SLAPP specifically for this particular reason, and that particular reason was true of Minnesota but not Colorado, then there's no hypocrisy, right? At that point, Nick is just taking a nuanced position. And nuance isn't hypocrisy as long as you're willing to apply it universally. Nuance is not hypocrisy as long as you're willing to apply it universally. So then my question would be whether or not that's a recent development in his philosophy. right? So is it the case that he always had this nuanced position? Well before this lawsuit ever came to be, well before, this was ever contemplated in anyone's mind. He had this position where he's like, I only dislike anti-slap statutes that have this kind of problem. Minnesota's version has this kind of problem. Therefore, Minnesota's version is unconstitutional. And he would have taken the position that Colorado was always okay. So would he have always made this distinction, which is one version of reality? Or did he take the position that only as a result of this? So only as a result of this lawsuit, he's taken the position. Then the next question is assuming that he's only taken it because of this. The next question would be whether or not he's truly been convinced he was wrong in the first place, or whether or not he's engaged in special pleading, whether or not he's taken the position merely because it's convenient for him right now. So has he truly been reformed, as it were, and truly seen the error of his ways and like, oh, I was wrong. Now that I've seen the light, I'm willing to apply this universally, and I was always wrong. Or is he merely adopting it because it's convenient? So which of those realities are we in? So hopefully that is all clear as I try to very nuancedly critique this, because I'm trying to engage in a lot of nuance too. So I'm like, so did he adopt it before or did he adopt it now? If he adopted it now, was it for this reason or for that reason? So lots of nuance along the way, right? As I try to figure this out. So, and I want to make clear again that I stated from the very beginning that I didn't really fully understand Nick's position. I just had understood him because I listen to Nick sometimes, as I do, because he's my friend, and hopefully will continue to be my friend. I had understood him to be opposed to it, but I didn't understand exactly why. So I'm like, is there a problem here? Is there a problem here? And why is he taking this position? It seems a little, there's a question in my mind, is it this or is it this or is it this or is it this or what's going on here? And so all the rest of it. And so maybe Nick and I can talk about it. We'll have a stream together and he can explain to me all this or not, or he can, use this entire discussion as a response in his stream or whatever. So I've given him lots of material to talk about if he wants. So I also look forward to everyone flooding Nick with DMs just saying, Kurt is just raking you over the coals. Kurt is just uncivil, is just destroying you, Nick. Uncivil, absolutely destroying you and raking you over the coals. What a slap fight he's having. What a rah blah blah. And just like, destroying all nuance and all this discussion. And yeah, I look forward to the 3,000 DMs that Nick is probably getting right about now. That's great. Lord have mercy. All right. So anyways, pressing on. Nick's special motion dismisses denied. First is denied with regard to count 1 because Colorado doesn't apply in this present case, which, fair enough. It would make sense that Colorado could apply in the first instance, by the way. So, by the way, in case we want to discuss it just for more legal edification, by the way, about why Colorado law could apply, as long as doing legal education, why not? The reason Colorado law might apply is because this is an intangible harm, right? And so we deal with the situs, as we say in law, the situs of the harm. And so the situs of an intangible harm, such as defamation, is often thought to be the place in which the person who's being defamed is being hurt. So I'm assuming Quest lives in Colorado, because otherwise this doesn't make any sense. So Quest, I'm assuming, lives in Colorado. So Quest's argument for why Colorado law, apologize, because Quest wants it the other way around. Nick's reason for saying that Colorado law should apply is that Quest lives in Colorado. The situs of the injury is Colorado. Therefore, Colorado law should apply. And Quest's argument for Minnesota is that is where the defamation came from. It's where Nick lives. It is not unfair to him to apply the law to his state. And also, the state has said at least some version of this is unconstitutional. And apparently the Minnesota court here is not willing to make this distinction that Nick is trying to make, maybe, and all the rest of it. So that's why their respective positions are the way they are. And the uh, court here says Minnesota law on this conflict and choice of laws issue, which makes sense, but that's why they're taking the positions they are. So that was way too much legal education right now. Yeah, that's all that stuff. So that's why they're taking those positions. Oh, and then John Doe says he might have lived in Colorado, but suddenly changed his address to Illinois. Yeah, I vaguely remember that occurring on dispute about where does he live. Well, I suppose it would be, yeah, I suppose the correct place would be the time of the injury occurring. So where he lives now is kind of, well, yeah, where he lives now would be immaterial. The question would be where he lived at the time of the injury, because obviously the injury occurred at a time and a place where he lives somewhere. So whether he lives in Illinois now is probably not material either way. Right? It's probably not material whether he lives in Illinois, because the question would be the situs of the injury, and the injury occurred when Nick said it, if it did. And if he lived in Colorado at the time, then the situs of the injury would be Colorado, even though he lives in Illinois now. By way of comparison, it would be like having an automobile accident in Colorado. The situs of the injury is Colorado. Where he moved to doesn't change that. So that would be an analogy to make sense of it. So yeah, does he live in Illinois now? Maybe. Does it change anything? Probably not. Because assuming arguendo he lived in Colorado at the time, the situs of the injury is Colorado, not Illinois. So he'd be correct to invoke Colorado law, despite where he lives now. So yeah. So all that. Yeah. Yeah. All those things. Let's see. Where there's a choice of law issue in Minnesota, the court must first find a conflict, which, yeah, and then did 5 choice, fine. Most of the factors apply in Minnesota law. In Minnesota, accusations of P word are traditionally treated as defamation per se, fine, and tested by the reasonable person standard to understand whether a reasonable person would understand the accusations as truthful. Or more to the point, well, statements of fact, because statements of opinion can't be true or not. So statement accusations as truthful is probably not, well, yeah, I guess truthful is technically correct in best kind of correct, because if it's so absurd as to not be believable, then no one would understand them to be true, even though they purport to be statements of fact. So I suppose understand them as true is correct, because if the person listening to them understands them to be false in the first place, there's no injury. If they understand it to be so absurd as to not be true, it can't be understood as truthful, so there's no injury. So I suppose technically correct is the best kind of correct. Truthful is the correct word here. So fine. The standard is treated as a question of fact for a jury that cannot be decided on summary judgment. Therefore, they're not entitled to summary judgment. Neither is Rikita entitled to summary judgment on intentional infliction of emotional distress. They must show injury at the stage of litigations is premature and maybe later. Okay, all that stuff. All that stuff. So I understand this. This makes logical sense to me. This isn't necessarily to say, by the way, for the record, just so that I'm clear about this, that I necessarily agree with the court's decision. I am not taking a position right now as to whether or not I agree with it, but I am taking the position that it's legally viable. I'm also taking the position as hypothetical court of appeals that I don't think there's anything I can do about it. Because even if I were to disagree with the trial court, that doesn't necessarily mean I can do anything about it as a hypothetical court of appeals. Because the hypothetical court of appeals is going to view such things under standards such as, for example, abuse of discretion or clear error, neither of which appears to be manifest at this time. So or just, the only thing you could try to de novo this on is the issue of which law should apply, I guess. But I don't think the court is necessarily wrong there either on that analysis. So as hypothetical court of appeals, whether I would agree with this or not, I don't think there's anything I can do about it because it is legally viable decision, even assuming the complete opposite decision would also be legally viable, which is a distinct possibility because courts get discretion, and that discretion can sometimes go both ways. So, yeah. So, all that stuff. And, just for the sake of absolute clarity, by the way, as always, I would discourage you from contacting any of the parties in this to harass any of them. That is not befitting of people. These people, there's no cause to harass anyone. And so I don't know Steve Quest. I don't really know much about him. But please don't target him for harassment or because there's no need for that. Yeah. So all that stuff. So we'll see. Yeah. So that was a lot. That was a lot more than I expected. I'm not reading his Kiwi Farms page. That's okay. That's a wasteland of pain. And that's okay. I don't think I'll be doing that today or any day. Duncan says, even if I were advocating for myself, there's a difference between the world and laws as I think they should exist in a world and laws which actually do exist. Um, I think that's generally true. I'm not sure it's true in the specific case where you're invoking the protection of the law you disagree with. I'm not sure if it's true in that specific situation. You know, it's like it's like people who call for more taxes but do everything possible to avoid paying their own taxes. It's like people who call for more housing for the homeless but do everything possible to prevent that homeless property from being developed because it hurts their personal interests. It's I'm not really sure that distinction exists when it comes to advocating for one thing for everyone else. Rules for thee and rules for me suck. Rules for thee, but not rules for me blows. Is basically what I'm trying to say. Rules for thee, but not rules for me blow. And so if you're like, the rule should be no slap, and you don't have to invoke it, which you don't, right? You don't have to invoke it. It's like sovereign citizens, when they go to, it's like sovereign citizens when they go to appeal or something, right? Or sovereign citizens when they say, I want the protection of the Constitution, the very thing that I disagree. I have the right of due process because the Constitution protects me, even though I don't believe in the Constitution because I'm not bound by it. Right? It's trying to have your cake and eat it too, and I don't really like that. It's bullshit. I don't like it when sovereign citizens do it. I don't, I think there's a difference between understanding there's a reality that you don't like and invoking the protection of that reality because it just happens to be convenient for you when you don't have to. It's like, how much do you really believe in this, right? How much do you really believe in it? It's like everyone else should do something, but I don't want to give it up. Yeah, who's going to be the first to drop? Who's going to be the first to drop it when, all that. So, yeah, yeah. So I need lunch and I need a workout in that order. I am hungry as shit, and I need to get food in my stomach so I don't pass out in the middle of my workout. Tova says, I disagree with that. In my opinion, you should use anything that's lawful to full advantage, no matter your thought on it. Maybe. I'm not sure if I agree with that or not. I think I disagree with that. Yeah, I think I disagree with that. Leg day, not today, man. My legs are a little sore. So probably more arms today. Probably work on my chest press and curls and stuff like that. Overhead press, maybe. Yeah. It wouldn't appear hypocritical to utilitarian. I'm not sure. I don't normally think from a Kant is my favorite philosopher by far. So I can't really. I'm not sure if I can intelligently speak right now, especially because I've been talking for 3.5 hours about whether or not it would be hypocritical from a utilitarian perspective or not. I'd have to think about it some more. I'll have to get back to you. A lawyer is ethically required to use everything he thinks will help you, right? Huh. Well, that's what I was saying. I think I spoke to this in quite some detail already. I think I spoke quite to the idea that the lawyer has every right to ignore Nick, and was the lawyer doing this over Nick's protest? You know, I think I spoke to that issue quite extensively already. That if the lawyer was doing this over Nick's protest, that that would be a different situation as well. Uh, so I think I already spoke to that issue quite intelligently. Let's go, Brandon. I already have a workout plan that's working for me. Support me in my current workout plan, please. Let's not let some other plan, which might indeed be better, be the enemy of my current plan. I worked out 13 days last month. I'm doing great. Let's support me. I have a plan. Let's press on. Yeah. So hopefully I've brought enough nuance on. And if Nick needs me to try to re explain this or provide additional nuance or clarification, or there is also a distinct possibility somewhere along the line I didn't quite express a thought quite right. So I tried to express it well, but there's a possibility somewhere along the line I missed something or misexplained something, or didn't adequately provide enough discussion. I tried to nuance the shit out of this as best I can, but when you're doing it on the fly, you might miss something. So if I miss something along the line and need to clarify something at some later point, then we'll do that too. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll do that too. I'm gonna sign off for now, and I'm gonna get food, and then I'm gonna go work out. I've been on civil law. Until later, my friends. I hope all is well. Cheers, my plans. Cheers, my friends, and goodbye. And if you tell Nick I talked about him, please, for love of God, tell him I still consider him my friend, and that I love him personally, and I hope he's well, and you know that I still think that I hope all's well with him. And yeah, and I'm happy to talk to him and take his call, and hopefully he won't call me just completely screaming in my ear. So we'll see about that, but we'll see where we can go. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.